Might help if I take that off. Hello, everyone. Starting soon. Yeah, starting now. That's the idea. So, good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, or good evening, song, where it is you're from. It's 4 p.m. in Britain at the moment, and finally, I get to have a British man on the on the show, so I don't have to do this at 9 o'clock at night and deal with the American time zones. But hopefully, it's not too early for the American crowd watching this. So, we'll. In terms of this, I've got Mark Dainty with me from Not Board Gaming, and it is definitely not board gaming, not never board gaming, as I keep getting it wrong every time, which is always a pain. Well, I've got the same problem with board gaming ramblings, because I keep saying board game ramblings. I keep forgetting it's gaming. It's just like slight spelling, but come on, get it right. No, it is specifically not board. Have you got, is that a pint there?
It is indeed. It is indeed. It is what, as you say, it's 4 o'clock here. I've had a hell of a week. I've got the week off work next week. My wife has taken the kids out. We've had the dog out for a walk. I'm having a chat with a friend, and therefore it's no better time than for a pint right now.
Fair enough. I need to up my game then, because I've just got a coffee to help me wake up. But decent coffee. So yeah, what is the point of this stream itself? Well, basically, both Mark and I are sort of big solo game fans, and we're essentially focusing on the man himself, Mr. Vital Lacerda, who, as you might know from just looking behind my head, designs mostly giant Euro games, particularly with Eagle Griffin games. In fact, that's kind of his shtick for the last decade, pretty much. As you can see from his little biography there, he's from Portugal, born in Lisbon, has a master's degree in marketing and advertising, has spent ages as a creative art director, and now board game design is pretty much his thing, but he focuses mainly on stupidly heavy giant Euros, and he's starting off with a few things. I mean, I think according to this, his first thing was an Age of Steam expansion for Portugal. So that's no surprise, obviously Portugal being where he's from, but I didn't realise that was his first thing. But thankfully, he eventually realised that there are better games out there than Age of Steam and focused on designing his own Euros. And so did a Vinhos one back in 2010, then did the first edition of CO2, and these were kind of different publishers. Kanban was with Stronghold, but it wasn't until about 2015 when Vidal basically started with Eagle Griffin doing a continuous series of giant Euros. So we had the Gallerist, and then Vinhos got in fact I can show behind me if I move the microphone a little bit. So started off with the Gallerist 2015, then did a re-implementation of Vinhos in 2016, which had the 2010 rules and a new version. Then moved on to Lisboa, then reprinted CO2 for a second edition, then tried to do a smaller game for Escape Plan, and then eventually got on to On Mars, which is a little bit lower down on my shelf. And then we've only just re-implemented Kanban for the Eagle Griffin range. Now, he has done one or two other things, according to this, Dragon Keepers and Railways of Portugal, and there was a small Lisboa spin-off, I think, coming off this year that was on Kickstarter, but I know nothing about those. I wouldn't have obviously kept up with Railways of Portugal, go figure, and I have no idea what Dragon Keeper is, but we're focusing pretty much solely on the Lacerda game range. And what the purpose of this stream is Mark and I have damn near killed ourselves for the last week by going through all the Lacerda Eagle Griffin games, although CO2 wasn't Eagle Griffin, was it?
No, it's a Stronghold one, CO2, I believe, yeah.
Right, the newest one. So,
yeah, Stronghold, yeah.
All right, so with that one exception, we're essentially going through all this recent stuff for those heavy Euros. We have gone through the solo modes in all those games. We have already played the multiplayer. I've done reviews on some. Mark's done reviews, I know, from solo perspectives. And we've decided, right, we had a refresher week or two where we just went through all the solo modes to refresh our memory on how they worked. Now, we are not going to explain how they all work, because trying to remember the rules to those games, like I say, Amnia killed us. The amount of rules we've just had to learn is beyond ridiculous. But
hence the reason I'm drinking at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, quite frankly, to tell you the truth, yes.
And why I'm on a coffee. It is mad. I mean, I already showed Mark to the left on that, but basically to try and mellow out from learning stupidly heavy Euros, the side of my table has Sleeping Gods on it, which I'm just about going through at the moment, and it's just like, But it feels like there's a fair bit of rules in it, but I just grasped it in like 5 minutes practically through the tutorial. And it's just like, this feels like a breeze compared to everything I've just had to absorb the last week. So it just feels nice. I can just play something a little bit easier to learn. But yeah, we're just basically going to go through each game, no particular order, and go through what we think of the solo modes in general, but also how each game kind of sort of, like I said, we're not going to explain specific rules, but we'll just give an overview of what the solo mode kind of does, and whether we think they're good or bad, because if you think this is going to be a glowing, like we're going to praise everything that there is, that's not going to be the case, because I don't know about, well, we'll go from a general standpoint, starting with a quick thing. In general, I love these games in different ranking order. And I do like playing the solo modes, but I do have a big issue that pretty much goes through all of them, which is one thing that does put me off, but we'll get onto that in a bit more detail. Okay. What about yourself?
Yeah, I think each game, first of all, there's a common DNA amongst all the games. You know you're playing a Vital Lacerda game because most of them... not all of them. Most of them are, as you like to say, an action selection game. Now, people get them mixed up as a worker placement game. It's possibly something we have to talk about in a bit. I think potentially only On Mars is more of a worker placement game as you start unlocking those little kind of those astronauts, workers to kind of put around the map. The rest of them are action selection. There is a common DNA. I've only ever played On Mars. The only Lacerda game I've played with other people is On Mars. Everything else I've purely played solo. And I far enjoyed my experience of On Mars multiplayer more than I enjoy my experience of On Mars solo. I think we'll come on to it more, but I think, as you say, there's a lot to love in the solo modes of Lacerda games. But should everyone be considered a classic? Maybe not. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, there are some issues I certainly have to think with them all, and actually, because I had to sort of think about is what I'm thinking about the On Mars one similar? And I watched your video earlier. Actually, you did one early last year.
Yeah,
you got a detailed one. We went over the whole thing. I'm kind of like, okay, I think Mark's on a similar wavelength to mine, so that's not so bad.
Yeah,
I didn't want to sort of be on there, so. I've been chatting for quite a while, and as I say, Mark has played all the games and owns all the Lacerdas. I do not. I do not have Escape Plan, and we'll get on to why later. And I also don't have the second edition of CO2, because I think it only pretty much got released on a Kickstarter, to my knowledge. And my only experience with CO2 that I have had was one play at a convention, 5 players, where we didn't know what we were doing from the get-go for the first edition, and I hated it. Not necessarily the game. I thought the game had some potential, but because we learned it in that setting, not knowing what we were doing, it took 3-4 hours or something to finish the game, and I'm just like, this was a bad idea. So that kind of put me off it, and it put me off getting the second edition, but I would like to try the second edition and see if it improves it for me. I suspect it probably would.
Yeah.
But I just need a proper setting for it. So we will start with CO2 now, and because I've been rabbiting on for the last 10 minutes, I can now hand this to Mark and let him take the reins for a bit.
Thank you, Luke. Yeah, and thanks everybody for joining on this chat, and thank you for passing the baton over to me on this particular one. And I think before we actually talk about just delve into CO2, I think kind of the purpose of the discussion, we have to kind of make sure that we're differentiating between a good solo, what's a good solo mode and what's a good game. And as we go through this collection of Lacerdas, I think what we'll find is some of them have great solo modes, but you may not necessarily rank the game as good as some of the other games. And, that's kind of the payoff that you'll get with some of these solo modes. So when we talk about CO2, I mean, CO2, not had it that long. I think I got it back end of kind of halfway through last year. And I've only played it maybe 3 or 4 times so far. Rock hard game. I know in the second edition, there is a competitive and a cooperative and a solo mode in the game. And it holds a little bit of a space dear to my heart, CO2 Second Chance. I work in the energy sector, very much in renewables. So kind of the race to net zero and how we're trying to tackle the carbon crisis around the globe is really, really important. And I think what Vital Lacerda has done here is create a fantastic and engaging theme about the carbon crisis. Yes, it may have dated ever so slightly a little bit now already because technologies move the whole time. And the solo mode is you're not playing against an AI. What you're doing is you're playing against the game in CO2. So you start off with a certain number of points in CO2. And then how you manage the kind of the generation of energy, the education of the nation, getting scientists out to seminars to discuss and conferences to discuss the energy crisis and the kind of the renewable energy sources that are out there, things like wind and things like solar, etc. You start combating these coal-fired power stations that are building up decade on decade, and it takes place over kind of 4 decades. It sounds sounds long, and I'll absolutely assure you, as a solo player or a multiplayer, and pretty much what Luke experienced in his first game, if you're learning the game, it absolutely feels like you're playing for 4 decades on that very first game. There is a lot of decision space in CO2. Now, I think the stroke of genius, I never played the first edition, I think the stroke of genius for Second Chance was to make it a co-op game. And it is by and large predominantly a co-op game with a competitive variant in there. And the solo just slots ever so nicely into that. So what you're trying to do is maximize the kind of building of your infrastructure and your power plants to offset the carbon that's being produced on a decade-long basis on the various continents around the world by these coal-fired power plants. And I think it absolutely works. I don't think there doesn't seem to be, from a solo perspective, a lot of kind of fat that needs trimming in this game. Now, that doesn't mean that it's not a very crunchy game, and I would rank CO2 Second Chance, unless you are very proficient at Euros and Lacerda games, probably as up there with some of his crunchiest when we're talking things like maybe On Mars and maybe Lisboa to a certain degree, although there is a flow in the solo of Lisboa that you can get around. But there's a lot of decision space in CO2, and I think it does a particularly good job. I think the only downside as a solo player when you're first learning CO2 is it is punishingly hard. It is ruthlessly hard. And, if you're trying to make it past that kind of second decade, it's very, very difficult to get your infrastructure in place, to send your scientists out to these conferences, to make sure you're hitting the kind of tiles at the top of the board that you need to do to turn around to stop the game beating you. But the stroke of genius in this is it's not necessarily a beat your own score. And we'll talk about the Lacerda grouping and Lacerda scoring on a lot of the Eagle Griffin games, because I know Luke has got quite a bit to say about those. But this
we'll get
that. If you've played Kanban EV, then and you understand the solo version of Kanban EV, and then you'll also understand how the solo scoring in CO2 works. You're trying not to get below 0, basically. And there's lots of things as you go towards those end of decades where the power plants start coming in and they try to start reducing your score to 0. And I really like that aspect because it feels progressive to me. And I think it's almost a shame, and we'll talk about this a little bit more as we get through all the Eagle Griffin ones. It's almost a shame that other than Kanban EV, that kind of scoring mechanism isn't used. Yes, you can then add loads of layers on top of that about, okay, so I'm not dying or I'm not getting fired, or, in round 2 of every game, or the Earth isn't just doomed in round 2 of every game. So once you're kind of completing a full game, then absolutely, those kind of success criteria can fit in. But I think that this and Kanban EV, and we'll certainly talk about Kanban EV in a wee while, certainly have the scoring aspect there right. Looking at it.
So with this one, because I didn't even think we were going to be talking about this at first, because I knew it was going to be a co-op. But is this, when you play it solo, are you just playing it multi-handed?
No.
Or is it actually a dedicated, this is if you are playing by yourself, and this is how you are if you're 2 to 4 players?
So it's literally the same as the co-op game, basically. You're playing against the game, and you just play as one scientist, as one player board, not as one scientist, as one player board. I suppose you could play it multi-handed. I believe that there are, and you'll have to forgive me, this was one that I played at the beginning of the run, there are solo objectives cards that you can do, and a slightly different setup on the solo as there is to a normal co-op. So it does give a solo spin there, but if you can play this co-op, then you can certainly play it solo. There's no different, you don't need those other people.
Right.
Yeah.
That's cool. I didn't know if it was like if a solo mode just simply meant control 2 different players, but if it's balanced for having just one person's board, then fine. Yeah, that's okay, cool.
And I think that, there's a lot of, when we talk about a lot of the Lacerdas, and people wonder about an entry point into Lacerda. I'm not saying that CO2 is definitely an entry point. Price-wise, it may be cheaper than going down the Eagle Griffin route to see if you like the feel of the...
That's not saying much.
But there is.
I'm pretty certain CO2 doesn't enter triple-digit figures for cost for a kickoff.
No, it doesn't, and some of that kind of shows. But everything on there is thematic now. I'm not saying it looks anywhere near as beautiful as some of the Eagle Griffin games, or neither is the story solution. Actually, it's okay. The story solution in CO2, to tell you the truth. The rule book is good. It leads in nicely, but it kind of wears its heart on its sleeve. Wears its look on its sleeve a little bit. Whereas the Eagle Griffin stuff is a little bit more flashy in design, if you like, and a little bit more market.
Yeah. I like the look of this one fine. I mean, yes, it's not going to measure the Eagle Griffin, but come on, that's a big budget, big cost, tool. It's going to do that. But the first CO2 I didn't think looked particularly good. This one I think is a significant, at least artwork upgrade. Yeah. And these pieces all look fine. It's wooden pieces. It's no weird translucent plastic and chintzy cardboard or anything. It's pretty good. And to be fair, I said my first experience was bad, but we played it in the worst possible setting possible. I would like to grab this one at some point and try it, because as some people have kind of mentioned here, Michael's mentioned here, I like this solo since you have a dynamic opponent. And I agree. I do like it when you have a dynamic AI or system that's kind of not always 100% predictable. I don't mind that to an extent, because it's like a puzzle you can solve. But when something can just throw you for a loop at times and give you something there. And I like the theme of this one fine, the environmental side of it. So I had no problems necessarily with the game itself, other than that the rule book was diabolical when we were trying to learn it. So, this is such an apt name for this one, Second Chance.
Second Chance.
I want to give this one a second chance. This is one of those games.
And I think, as I say, as solo players, if you are interested in Lacerdas and you don't have Lacerdas and you don't want to spend triple-digit figures, this gives you the essence of a Vital Lacerda game. You have this action selection. You are chaining a number of moves together to get an ultimate goal, and that can change at any one time depending on how you're playing against the game there. So I think it's a really good entry, and there you can see that's the story solution there. It's not as flashy as some of the game trade stuff that happens in the Eagle Griffin stuff, but it's perfectly functional and works very well. Yeah,
does what it need to, and at least I can tell where everything goes. I mean, that's one thing about the Eagle Griffin inserts that does do my head. Although, to be fair, every publisher does this. I hate it when they don't put component setups in the rulebook for how they go back in the box. What was the one I did one recently? Yeah, the Anachrony, the big giant box for that. That's all on me. That has, with the Infinity box, a full 4-page spread on how things go back in the box.
Brilliant.
And even with that, it took me a while to get everything packed away or something like that. If I didn't have those diagrams, I think the Anachrony box would be impossible to put away, because you would not know what you were doing.
So I played it from the Infinity box maybe half a dozen times now, and I still have to refer to the booklet to put everything away. I'm almost there now. I could almost do it out of memory. But if I've had a week or so's break from playing Anachrony and I try and put it back together, I do need to look at that book. But yeah, so CO2 Second Chance. Where does it rank against all the Lacerdas in a solo mode? Well, maybe you'll find out a little bit more as we go through this discussion. But for me, it's I like the game. I like it more than I thought I would, and it certainly speaks to me, as I say, from a personal perspective with the route to net zero and the carbon climate crisis.
Fair enough. I can just make a mental note of 19 minutes because I want to get the timers right. But right now I can finally chime in well, because we'll do escape plan a little bit later. Let's do one that is quite dear to my heart as well. Have a look at Gallerist. So the Gallerist has been one of those Vital games that has constantly been fighting for the top spot as to which one is my favorite, alongside Kanban. But this was when Kanban was in its Stronghold version. Now that it's in its Eagle Griffin version, that disparity has now closed up again. So trying to think of which one I like. This one has been a favorite of mine because even though Escape Plan gets the shtick of this is the shortest and more accessible of his games, I finally found this one more accessible. This is one of those ones where even if I've put it down for a while, the way the rulebook's laid out and the way the game's quite intuitive and those reference aids, I just find this one the easiest one to pick up again. So when I had to come back to the solo for this, because I don't tend to play it solo, it was a breeze, certainly compared to the rest of them. That goes without saying. And for those who aren't aware of the Gallerist, well, you were running an art gallery. That's kind of the deal with the theme. Each one of you is a curator. Again, victory points is the name of the game, but you have got 4 locations to go to with 2 actions apiece. You are discovering artists, buying their art, sticking it in your art gallery to essentially kind of play like an economic game. You buy it as low as possible, and then as you promote the artist and get them more famous, the art becomes worth more, and then you either sell it or you keep it in your gallery while messing around with these little meeples to get them to come to your gallery, which give you bonuses and various things. On top of that, you've got a little international market on the left there, which is kind of like your end game scoring objectives. Go there, get a tile that says score points for X, score points for Y, you know, all sorts of things. What really sells this one to me, not just for the fact that, funny enough, it's a game about art and it looks beautiful, but which is kind of fitting. This one feels, out of all of the Lacerda games, the one that feels most rewarding as you play it. And this works for solo and multiplayer, because when you do an action, you feel like you've got something, and every time you get like a tile and put it on your board, you get some bonus. I get a ticket, I get this bonus, I get this, I trigger this. So you don't feel like you did a turn where it was rubbish and nothing happened. Whereas a lot of big Euros, Crunch Euros, can punch you down if you don't do the exact right thing.
Absolutely.
So the solo mode in this one is pretty much a predictable one, and this is my slight quip with it, because out of all the Lacerda solos, this is probably the easiest one to micromanage, because pretty much all you do is have Lacerda's pawn on the location. It moves around clockwise, leaves a guy behind, and if you kick him off an action, because in this game, if you it's worker placement sort of, but more action selection, but you don't get blocked out of a location. If you kick someone out of a location, they get the chance to do an action as a bonus. So it's quite a cool back and forth. Here, it's just simply if you kick him out, then some of the scoring tiles go away, or the ticket piles that dictate the timer for the game dwindle. So the more you kick him out, the less time you've got. So it's kind of like you got to keep up the pace, but not quicken the game so much that you can't achieve what you need to do. Other than that, though, the AI doesn't really do a lot, and that's my kind of main quip with this. Yes, it's easy to micromanage, but there's not a lot going on. It's basically play the Gallerist by yourself, and the timer is shorter than if you were playing a multiplayer game. And you still at least get to do bonus actions if you get kicked out by Lacerda, but again, it's predictable because you know exactly where he's going to go, whereas a multiplayer game, you don't. I could be leaving assistants out everywhere, praying that my friend goes and kicks me out of the radio stations, or I can promote an artist, and it may not happen. But well, I'll leave it at that. What do you think?
I think this hits that real dichotomy. I love the Gallerist as a game. It's a beautiful looking game. As you say, it's really accessible. It really is. You know, it may seem daunting, but it's not. There are essentially just 4 spaces on the board, and that is it. There are a number of actions you can do there. But this hits that real kind of thing I was talking about earlier, where we're talking about a really good game is different to having a really good solo mode. And the beauty of the solo mode, as you say, in the Gallerist is just it's easy to manage. That Lacerda pawn just moves around. It never stops moving around in a clockwise circle. And other than leaving an assistant behind on every space, it only ever takes one action, and that action is in the international market, which becomes predictable. And that is the issue with this. Now, I know that a number of people are far better at Euros and action selection and worker placement games than me. And the issue that they have with the solo of the Gallerist is it's quite solvable. I haven't got there yet. I've won a couple of games, but invariably I'm terrible at games like this anyway. But I think once you crack the code on this, you're not really going to find that much of a challenge there. So this then becomes, a large number of people reach out in the solo community and say, no, I like Lacerdas. Should I get the Gallerist purely for solo? I've got it purely for solo. It's never leaving my collection. But it's a really difficult one to recommend purely for solo. And this is where we get that striking that balance between a beautiful game and a solo that could be more challenging.
Yeah, I couldn't see myself saying if you're only going to play the solo, because you're losing that. One of the great things about this is that this is one of the more interactive of the Lacerdas, because of the fact that when you get kicked out of a location, you get to do a bonus. But if it's predictable, it doesn't feel quite as interactive as a player doing it, because the players will do it at times which will either benefit you or the wrong timing. Like, don't kick me out just yet.
Yeah.
And the certain other aspects of this don't come into play as much, like the tickets aren't going around. Like you're leading a few people to your gallery, but that's it. Lacerda doesn't take them away, so you can just get whatever visitors you want and hang on to them, the opponent's not going to steal them from the plaza in the middle for any reason. But yeah, this one was fine as a solo mode, but I just can't see myself going, yeah, I'm only going to play this solo. Occasionally I'll bring it out for a solo just because it's so easy to do.
Yeah.
And I'll get onto this now, really, because this is the biggest annoyance I have with all the Lacerda solos. And this one has it, so does Kanban to a point, so does Lisboa, so does On Mars. Somebody mentioned earlier, I think it was a Fatal got mentioned earlier, I'll bring it up again. So I like solo modes against the game, a simulator player, versus those that just beat some arbitrary high score threshold.
Yeah.
This one doesn't so much have a high score, or the Lacerdas in general, they don't necessarily have a high score threshold, but they have this annoying tier ranking system that does my head in. Because this one, you don't even have victory points for Lacerda, and I think there's one other that does similar, I'm not sure, but maybe I'm wrong on that. But the rest of them will have at least beat Lacerda's VP. Okay, cool. That's all I want. Just give me a chance to beat an AI at VP. And then I could say, right, well, after beating them, did I beat them by 20, by 10, whatever, and then I could beat that under my own discretion. This one and a bunch of them have this tier system where after you have decided whether you've beaten the AI, it then says, right, now rank yourself on this list. Yeah. And the tiers are, they destroy the experience a bit for me at the end, because when you do the harder ones, they are just downright impossible. Like, I don't even know how you're supposed to achieve the top 2 levels of any of the tiers in these solo games. They're just asking far too much. But even the small ones, they usually require, let's say in this one, it's like, you need to have like 3 works in your gallery. You need to have achieved at least 2 goals on the curator card, 1 on the sale card, get 4 or 5 reputation tiles, sell a piece of art, have so many people in your gallery. You know, it basically says get X of all these different things.
Yeah.
That's annoying though, because it forces me to do with the same problem that I have with Agricola, which is that as fun as the game can be, it forces you to diversify into everything. Otherwise, it tells you you're rubbish.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, I beat this game and I won by 30 points. And I just conveniently had all this. Oh, but you didn't have 4 reputation tiles. You only took 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I won by this method. No, you only took 2 out of 4. You suck. You're an intern. It's like, excuse me? It's like, excuse me, I beat your AI. Yep, don't care. You didn't have 4 reputation tiles. Screw you. It's like... It's a kick in the teeth.
It's almost a cheat on the development of the solo mode. It's like, yeah, well, we got it this far, and we could develop it further, but in reality, we're going to pass it over to you now. And I think the Gallerist, for me, from a solo perspective, is a game that utterly defines it's about the journey and not the destination. You play the game your way, win the game your way. If it is just a kind of, you just want to play the game and you don't really care about the end score, which is generally how I get about it. I may look at the tiers and think, okay, I've got 160 cash or whatever it is. But I have a really good and relaxing time playing the Gallerist. And I think as opposed to say something like, I don't know, On Mars, and we'll come on that in a bit, how that is so stressful to play sometimes. The Gallerist is all about, okay, I want to spend an hour just relaxing, playing this. If I win against, these arbitrary tiers, then that's fine. But I don't really care at the end of the day. I just want to play the game. And I think that's where I have the most enjoyment out of the Gallerist. But you're absolutely right. I think along with the scoring mechanism and in these big triple-figure games, the lack in most of them of a solo player aid. And we'll talk about that in a bit and maybe one other game. I think these tiers are just a little bit of a cheat.
Yeah, because it forces you to play in a certain fashion. Like, I have to get a bit of everything. And it's like, well, no. The reason I like Caverna more than Agricola is because I get to specialize. Yeah. Agricola means you have to get a veg, you have to get a grain, you have to get a cow, because you get penalized like crazy if you don't. That always gets on my nerves. Whereas in Caverna, if I just want to do nothing but farm sheep, interpret that how you will, then I want to just farm sheep. Let me have 100 sheep in my farm and get 100 points for it. And it's like, great. With the Gallerist and all these other Lacerdas, it's like, I tell people when they learn Euros, pick a path, stick with it, don't deviate, specialize, and just see what happens. And that's what I do in every single Euro game. I just pick a route and go with it, because you can't do everything. But these force you to do everything. Yeah. And it's like, well, no, I want to play like this. I do this against multiplayer, but the bot forces you to do it. And as much as we can say, all right, well, let's ignore the tier system, the problem is this game doesn't have a point system for Lacerda, so you have to abide by the tier system. Otherwise, you are literally just playing the game for the sake of playing it.
And that comes down to this balance. People want a simple to manage AI and solo mode. And this is almost the antithesis of something like on Mars. This has almost no, so you don't even have to read the solo rules for this. You're just moving him around and leaving that worker there, and that's it basically, and that's the only impact it's got. So you've got that. Yeah,
I wish they were all this easy to implement. That's the thing.
It needs more. For me, it needs more. It's great as a way to learn the game, as a way to have a journey, as I say, and I enjoy it. I really do enjoy it. It's a beautiful game which deserves a better solo mode, in my perspective.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of comments that I can get. Firstly, the art in this is not atrocious. I don't know what you're looking at if you think the art in this is bad.
I like art.
Yeah. Ian O'Toole, when he does his artwork proper, is great. Now, when Ian O'Toole is doing these games, I like his art and graphics. When he literally has to colour a hex green, that's not what I call art. So as much as everybody says, oh, look at Iron, what's it called? Right of Rails and Irish Gauge and all that stuff. And it's like, I think the new age of Steam or something. It's like, look at the Ian O'Toole's artwork, and it's like, it's a green hex. There's only so much you can mess up on a green hex, but this is lovely detail. I look at this and just say, I'm engrossed in the art world, and I know nothing about art. I wouldn't be seen in an art gallery to save my life, because I don't know, future girlfriend notwithstanding. But this is not my scene, but I'm looking at these and I'm interested in these pictures. In fact, I like how some of them, I make a joke about one of them because I got like some promo tiles for this. And one of them, some of them have like draw your own picture.
All right,
like those stupid. I don't like them in game, but I've got it in the game and I deliberately left it blank. Right. Because I always make fun of abstract art, where it's just basically a bunch of like shapes, and apparently that's art and worth £1 million. It's like, what? So the fact that this tile literally on there just has a square with nothing in it, I just joke that that's art because apparently somebody would pay £1 million for it. I don't know.
But yeah, so I think it is a stunning game. It's and we'll probably touch on this a little bit more. A lot of the Lacerdas deserve a better solo mode to fully appreciate this. Artwork is beautiful. I don't totally agree with Michael there, but art is always subjective, and therefore he's if he doesn't like it, that's perfectly fine as well. Yeah.
Oh, by all means. I mean, the top 10 beautiful games I did the other week with Board Game Perspective. Check that out if you want some subjective views on that. I'm interested. I'd like you to put in the comments, Michael. You said you generally make your own goals in a solo game, so I'd be interested. What goals would you put in this one, for example? You know, I mean, how do you just like create arbitrary goals like that? And hello to Jonah, had her on the channel last time, so popping in to be obnoxious. just play Spirit Island. Look, I like Spirit Island, and I am so tempted to buy it just for solo mode, but I know it's fiddly, and every time I've played it multiplayer, it's taken like 3 hours and is all over the shop. So I'm kind of like, do I or don't I? But I don't know. You'll have to convince me, Jonah. That's all I can say.
Yeah,
right.
If you watch my just to put in there, if you watch my video this week about which games I got rid of, although I almost mentioned Spirit Island. It almost made the list of games I got rid of. I still need to try it more. It hasn't grabbed me. I'm sorry. Yeah,
I'm pretty sure Jonah won't watch your channel anymore or something if you get rid of Spirit Island. So
they're in most of the population. That's fine. Yeah. So.
Boo. All right, let's get off this and move on to another one. So I don't know, pick one out of all of them. What do you want to talk about next?
Let's do Lisboa. I was playing that at ridiculous o'clock this morning. Basically, I woke up stupidly early. I'm just telling Luke before this started. I got next week off work, my first week off this year, and this morning my brain at 5:30 just decided to say, "Hey, wake up." So I was on rather than set the game out. I went to Tabletop Simulator this morning and played half a game of Lisboa this morning.
But as I did on Mars earlier this morning, so yeah, I know exactly how you feel on that one. Yeah, was mad. But Lisboa I did a few days ago, and I did cheat a little bit because I used Tabletop Simulator for this one and Vinhos also, because I had like Gallerist set up on the table and I couldn't be bothered to put it away, so I just used the mod, which worked fine. It still had the ability to do solos, but with Lisboa, let's see, I explained the last one quite a bit. Do you want to go through this one generally, just a general overview?
So Lisboa is set in 1755, something like that. There'd been this huge
X-date.
X-date. In the past, some deep dark day in the past in Portugal, there'd been an earthquake and a tsunami, which then devastated the city of Lisboa and caused, numerous fires and destruction, etc. So you, over a number of years, are going to play part of the aristocracy, I think, or nobles, basically, working with the nobles, trying to rebuild Lisboa. You're going to use part of the ruins. You're going to build new stores. You're going to produce goods. You're going to send goods out to sea. You're going to open public buildings. It's a beautiful, beautiful looking game. Now, I'm going to be honest on this. I've only played it 1.5 times so far. So about a week or so ago, Randall from Eagle Griffin was kind enough to send me a copy of Lisboa. So I had one full learning game. And then I played half a game this morning on Tabletop Simulator. I will say it's not my favorite Lacerda solo, but I'm far more enjoying my second game so far than I did in my first game. My initial impression of Lisboa solo on the first game, and it was a learning game, was it felt very mechanical. And I think this has got quite a lot in akin from a solo perspective with the Gallerist, in the fact that you have your courtier and his helper moving in set patterns across the board, basically. So, the courtier moves across the nobles, the helper moves up and round the various cards that you can pull from, and that dictates what action they take. So you can start planning out for these moves. I haven't played it nowhere near enough to find out whether that's too much of a problem, and I can see it can be for some people. However, I think it's given me a pretty good taste of the game. Now, Luke, you played it multiplayer and solo. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, Lisboa, I mean, if I was ranking all my Lacerdas out of the 5, ignoring CO2 and Escape Plan, out of the 5 that I've got in my collection, this is kind of ranked number 4, but that's not saying it's bad. It's just I like the other 3 more. Although this one in Vinhos is starting to tie for 3rd place. It's starting to sort of fight in. And I've played it more than 1.5 times than that, because as much as I don't necessarily go mad on the theme, I mean, I get the theme. I mean, this is, Vital could explain for half an hour straight the entire history of this earthquake and tsunami and what happened afterwards. I mean, this is something that's this is almost like probably the biggest passion project for Vital, because this is obviously, exactly, it's his personal country's history. So it makes sense. His personal city's history, in fact, because this is Lisbon, effectively. And I do think it's a beautiful game, although I did have qualms about the whole... I know that this is meant to be the colour of the tiles that they had on the buildings there, this blue and whitish like look, and it is beautiful. It's just everything kind of blends together on the board a little bit too much, like trying to see everything, but that's a minor quibble. I actually found this to be one of the better solo modes I played, though, because it's slightly predictable, because essentially how it works is a curator pawn moves across those 3 nobles and triggers their actions in turn, as at the same time another pawn is used to go over these 4 deck piles to remove them from the game. So it's not that... I mean, occasionally he can throw you for a loop in what they're doing, because obviously the decision tree as to where they go is different, but it's kind of half predictable, half not. But this one I found, and it was a bit of a bug to learn all the rules, because alongside On Mars, this is one of the more complicated Lacerda games I found to try and micromanage the AI for a kickoff, because there's like a 2-page summary for rule set, but there's a lot of different actions to this game, and you have to know what Lacerda does at every single one, which is always a pain. But once you get into the swing of it, it's not too bad. But it's a good way to get better at the game from your own perspective, building on the shopping streets and using the nobles and figuring out the cards. But I love even though the theme is a bit of a pain to explain, I love the card play in this. This is what sells me on Lisboa. The whole grid thing with the streets, I like it fine. I can take it or leave it. But it's what you do with this portfolio of cards on your player board that sells it for me, because I'm deciding, I could use this card for this, but then it also has this use. I'm a massive fan of multi-use cards. I keep saying that all the time. And it kind of it works for me, and there's a lot of branching paths. I love the clergy tiles, giving you like up to 4 different bonuses. And with multiplayer, that grid becomes a very interactive environment, as well as this treasury tracking. So this has a lot going for me. The only reason it doesn't rank as high, I'm saying that is starting to fight for Vinhos, is partially because the others, I like the theme more.
Yeah.
But also, this one, like I said, is a very complex one to remember. I mean, I had all the different rule sets in front of me, trying to learn it just to remember how things worked before I got to the solar, and my brain was melting, although not as bad as on Mars. Yeah. And it just it's not the easiest one to get back into. Like you need to play this one semi-regularly to remember it. But the AI does have victory points, so you do have to beat them, which is good. And I found it challenging enough. I mean, I beat it on my first try earlier this week, so granted, but the problem is that I think the difficulty's been slightly curbed in this game because, again, those stupid tier systems. Because it says, did you beat the AI? Great. Well, that's some of your score. Now, did you get this many stores, this many things? It's like, oh, for crying out loud. And funny enough, I beat the AI fairly well. I can't remember, like 10, 15 points or something, so it wasn't exactly a whitewash. But then it said, right, did you have so many? And I didn't read them ahead of time. So I went into this blind with the scoring and played my own way. I specialized in, what did I do? I think I was mostly building stores for the most part. I didn't really focus on decrees. I grabbed as many clergy tiles as I could, did a bit of shipping. But then at the end it said, right, I've got this. Oh, okay, by fluke I've got this. Have you got a ship? By fluke, yes, okay, I've got a ship. But then only just had enough stores for basic level. And then it said, did you get 5 or 6 decrees? It's like, well, no, I took 3 because they were 5 points apiece and I was focusing on other stuff. Well, then you didn't even get the bottom rank of the tier. And it's like, again, screw you, Lacerda. I played the game and had fun. I'm not having you kick me in the teeth now. Yeah.
and I think, that is where that tier system, I can understand why it's there, and it should be there when you've mastered the game. But there is nothing wrong in saying, hey, you beat the AI. Well done. Yeah, let's just focus on beating the AI. And the fact it's not even kind of part of the scoring or part of the tiered system in the rule books, in some of the rule books, it's just a little bit deflating. And again, that kind of then kicks back to, is this about the journey or the destination? And I think from a solo perspective, you have to have that in mind for a lot of the Lacerdas. I think, like you, the card interplay on here, it's unlike anything else in any Lacerda game. Basically, you've got this tableau building, engine builder almost that you're doing this, which adapts, and it's quite dynamic depending on how many rubble cubes you've got and how much you've unlocked. So can you increase what's in your portfolio? The multi-use cards, as you either play them into the portfolio or you play them into the is it the Royal Court? I think is to take the actions on there. It's beautiful. And I say, my first game, I was slightly deflated, thinking I should like it more. Playing it again this morning, I'm thinking, actually, all that rules bloat that I thought was there in the first game is really starting to make sense to me now. And I was whizzing through it this morning, but
that's the problem. It's the barrier to entry for this one is high, because I was learning all those rules now, but I thought if I just played this straight away now or played it today, a lot of it would click. And this is the one reason why it hasn't hit the table multiplayer as much as some of the others, is because when I'm teaching this, if I teach a Euro game that's heavy, the better the theme or the stronger the theme, the easier I find to teach it. Because let's say I'm teaching Kanban. I've got to teach, right, you're in a car factory. You need blueprints. Okay, then you get the parts. Then you go build it. Then you go test it. It makes sense. And people can relate to that. I've got to give somebody a 10-minute history lesson on what this game is about before we even start. And even then, I'm explaining 3 individuals, a king, an architect, and some other dude. I can't remember who he is. And I've got to then remember, right, court officials do this. That's a public building. And there's a lot of micro rules for how certain things work. Like, this is what happens when you build a store. This is what happens when you do a public building. And it just makes it very hard to teach the game because people don't know this kind of theme off the top of their head. Yeah, it's not one people relate to as much. Like I say, this is Vital's passion project as opposed to an easily explainable game. And so that barrier to entry of learning the rules is such a bugbear for the first game. And in fact, I think the first time I played this was a small gathering, not a convention. I think it was like a club about 10, 20 miles up north from where I am. And went there. First time I visited, I just wanted to meet new gamers. We played this. This was my first game. It turned out the 2 people who were teaching me didn't know it that well either, but they tried to teach me. And could blimey, I swear like an hour had passed before we even started playing. It was getting ridiculous. So it's like I really loved the game, and I thought, like, right, great, this was enjoyable, but man, I'm going to teach it in future, and even then, I find it tricky. So, but
yeah, I think for me, it is. It's. I need to play it more. I'm really enjoying it. I think you can sense it's a vital passion project, and I think what kind of the introduction and what's in the rule book about what happened back in Portugal in 1755, whenever, is really interesting as well, and that helps me buy into that. And I've just seen a comment here from Side Game saying that the theme is great for explaining the rubble tokens, and that's about it. I don't know if I totally agree with that, but I can absolutely see that the rubble tokens are an essential part of this game, and whether they're water damaged, fire damaged, or earthquake damaged, and the various kind of scoring are worth on there.
They're part of the theme, but then it doesn't. The fact that one is more costly to remove than the other. I mean, I don't know. I mean, just fire worse than flood damage. I don't know. But even then, you are just seeing a bunch of color cubes at the end of the day. It's not like they're. With this one, like I say, there's no denying that the theme is there. It is super strong, and if you read that history fluff, granted, I've already admitted on live on here that I am not a history fan. I gave it up after year 8 of school. I really did not like learning about Victorians in this Second World War for the umpteenth time. So it's like I say, history is just not my subject. So one reason why I didn't exactly get sucked into the theme of this one is because oh great, I got to learn this history lesson first. I'm very much a person that's about the now and looks forward as opposed to looks back. But that's just me. But one thing I will say that this solo mode had, like I say, it's got those tier systems and it is annoying. It's missing one thing that another Lacerda game does better, is that if this has been balanced to work with the tier system, then it should have more ways to make the game harder. And I could think of a few house rules I could throw into this to make it harder to score points. Like say, all right, maybe he scores this many points for this rather than this. Or perhaps normally he doesn't score for this particular category. Okay, now he does. And that would make it hard enough so I could say, right, I want to make this difficulty. And then I could just ignore the tiers and go straight for the AI. One game already does this, which I'm so happy about. But this is a recent addition, whereas some of these older ones kind of need it. But now, I mean, this is one of my favorites just to play. Once you get past that barrier, I found this to be a very fun solo game. Yeah,
and I think I'm coming around to that after that learning game, only halfway through this. I think, like a lot of the Lacerdas, the rule book is great, and Paul, wherever Paul's involved in that, Paul Grogan, it's fantastic, but
there's still a lot of it.
There's a lot of it, and the issue with the player aid being a little bit incomplete as well. So it tells you what the actions do, but you've still got to refer back to the rule book maybe to understand that. And same, at least this one does come with a solo player aid. It is a flimsy piece of paper, admittedly, but it does come with a solo player aid. But you're referring to that, to the little booklet that you have of the actions, and then you're referring back to the main rule book. And it's just my biggest bugbear outside of the tiering system, my biggest bugbear with a lot of these games, and I think maybe Kanban EV flips that a little bit, is just the lack of a decent player aid, and certainly from a solo perspective, you need a decent player aid.
I had to flick between 4 different things for this. That's the problem. You're going to have a lot of rules checking for this one, because there's the player aids that you get. When I first got that booklet, the first time I played it, I was like, I don't read all this. No way. It's not happening that. But it kind of, part of the book explains what the actions do. Part of it just goes through the turn sequence. But even then, I found myself chucking the main rule book because it leaves bits out. It's more good. It's a reference aid for all the cards and tiles. Great.
Absolutely.
But it's a memory jogger. Not much of that. But like I say, the barriers a bit of a pain. But I think we'll move on eventually. Although a few of those. Am I the only person who doesn't like the look of Lisboa? I'm on the fence. I do think it's beautiful, but I do think from a gameplay graphical design, everything kind of just blends in a little bit. Like it's difficult to see what part of the board is relevant and what isn't. So as much as I think it does look pretty, it does kind of work against it a little bit from a graphic design sense. Interesting, it kind of reminds of old Japanese style, though.
I get that with the white and blue. Yeah, you see that in a lot of the old kind of Japanese Empire designs, etc. So yeah, I get that.
That's fair enough. And actually, I didn't ask this question earlier. Actually, Dustin asked, "What is it you're actually drinking?" I know you're drinking alcohol, but what is it?
I am. And hi, Dustin. If you don't know Dustin Freund, he's the designer of the Ghost Betwixt, which is going out to backers fairly shortly. Cracking. I've got a kind of a production copy prior to going out, and I'm working on the review of that. It's a cracking kind of dungeon crawling RPG game. So hi, Dustin. Yeah, it is a Lockwood Pilsner, this, that I've just finished. So I maybe have kind of shot my bolt a little bit too soon there. So yeah, it was a Lockwood Pilsner.
And I was hoping it would be a cider, but never mind.
I don't drink ciders.
Cider's my thing. March Serenade. And we've already had side game mentioning about the Rebel tokens. Yeah. And yeah, great fluff text definitely adds. Like I say, the theme is strong. It's just there's a lot of it. I mean, Paul Grogan does the rules to a lot of these games. And if Paul Grogan didn't do a lot of the rules editing in this, I think some of these games would be unplayable. There's so many rules. But there's only...
I was just going to say a quick shout out to Paul, because I think that, Rodney Smith obviously does what he does, and he does it fantastically well. But Paul and Gaming Rules for these Vital Lacerda games, I learn purely from rulebooks. And I may watch Paul's videos afterwards, but that's just how I learn. I think if you want to learn a Vital Lacerda game, then go and check out Gaming Rules, because Paul does such an exceptional job of really walking you through those rules and resolving any ambiguities there. So I think, that you've got this perfect marriage of these games. You've got Vital designing them, publishing by Eagle Griffin, and Paul doing these rules and rules explanations. So please go and check out Gaming Rules. Well worth your time.
Yeah, like I say, I know it sounds like a bit of a plug in that, but he has done the videos for all these Lacerda games and that. And at the end of the day, like I said, I mean, they work up to a point. As I say, there's so many rules in some of these that even with his expertise, it's still difficult to learn these games. But just imagine how bad it would be if it wasn't. But, he does videos, and, so I give Rodney Smith respect. But Absolutely. He's doing a lot of simple games for learning those. He's catering to the new gamers. I don't think Rodney Smith could do a how to play for the Lacerda game. I think it would just be too much from that style. Whereas Grogan can go through and do like the meticulous detail that you need and still break it down. And a lot of these Lacerda games I have learnt by doing a video for that. Right, so moving on to the next one. Where's that put us? 52 for that one. I can choose the next one. Let's see. We'll do Escape Plan in a minute. But I think let's move on to Vinhos, the Vinhos wine game. So now we are talking specifically the 2016 Deluxe Edition version, because the new version came out with the 2010 rules and a 2016 variant. But the solo rule only worked with the 2016 version. So you can't do. And to be fair, I've not actually played this in the 2010 version. No. The rules are in there, but when I found out that part of the extra rules that were in the original game was bank loans and stuff like that, I'm like, no, come on, I'm playing a game about making wine. Screw you and your bank loans. It's like I don't want to take it to that level of complication. The 2016 version, though, a lot better, because this one streamlined a lot of those rules, brought the artwork and made it really nice looking as well, and focused more on the idea that you are building up vineyards and making the wine and getting it to the fair and essentially showing it off. So if you imagine viticulture is, here's my vineyard, the whole game is about working that vineyard.
So I fell asleep. You mentioned viticulture. Sorry, I just fell asleep there. So it's.
And with that, you're muted for the rest of the stream. Remember, I have the power here, Mark. Right? But as I say, it's not for him. But as I say, the viticulture is doing the old vineyard. This one is running the wine business. So you've got multiple vineyards. They're all making wine, and it focuses more about the fair. I mean, that's one aspect of it. You can aim for points in other areas, but it's predominantly my wine business, and occasionally I'm putting this wine in the fair and saying, look at this fantastic wine, and everybody look at me. Now with this one, as I say, if you know anything about wine, you've already got the gist of how this game works from a playing perspective. You are getting your estates up, putting a vineyard in them, maybe buying some wineries to go with them, staffing them with an entomologist.
Entomologist, I think it is, yeah.
I think that, like the technical term for it, and some farmers and that to make the wine quality better.
Enologist, sorry. Entomologists studies insects, don't they? It's
yes, it is, yeah. Yeah, that's not a particularly nice wine. Bees make bees make honey, spiders make wine. No, I don't think that's going to work. But you get these estates up, you make the wine, you get some wine experts that can help you with some special abilities and that. And yes, there is an economic game to this because you are still running a wine business. So you still got to be able to afford everything, but it's not. As much as money is super tight in this game, it's not like it's stupidly mathy. It's like it's pretty straightforward numbers. But I like the interactivity with this, where when you go to when you buy vineyards, you get these cube renown tokens to say, like, oh, this region of Portugal is known for its great wine, but everybody can use the renown. And it's very frustrating when you go and build up in a particular region only for some Burke to come by and nick your renown and use it for their benefit. It's like, excuse me, I'm the one who built up the reputation here. But on top of that, you've got this great, you can, well, I'll get on to that in a minute. You've got the ability to export points or sell the wine for money. And the fair, as I said at the end, you essentially get a wine and you try and like appeal to these experts, shall we say, the ones who are obsessed with smell, taste, and viscosity and all that, and get a number of fair points. Make it as popular as you like. Now, when it comes to the solo mode in this one is. It's a hit or miss for me as well. Again, we've already gone on about the tier rankings, and yes, this is in this game as well. I think it's in all of them. I don't like them, end of. But with this one, the AI basically, it moves around, and the rulebook goes to explicit lengths by saying that effectively Lacerda cheats. Everything that Lacerda does in this game is normally something you can't do in the multiplayer game, but it keeps reiterating in all the rules that this is Lacerda, he gets to do whatever he likes. It's like, thank you. So he doesn't have to pay money to, go around too far. You basically have a little card deck to flip over for an action, says which space he's going to go on this central part here, and there's also like a deck of numbers to randomize what he takes, which is like irritating to constantly have to shuffle and deal out, but it's needs must. And essentially, he plonks down money to make life more expensive for you, especially if you want to go to the same space he is. But what Lacerda is effectively doing is occasionally nicking not occasionally, always nicking your renown tokens, nicking some vineyard tiles, getting to the fair, and doing essentially similar to what you are, except he's having an easier time of it. Now, as this one is good in the sense that it helps to learn a bit of the game. I didn't find the rules too complicated with this one, and I didn't even find the micromanaging too complicated with this one. There's only so many different actions in the game, and once you know how they work for multiplayer, they don't really work much differently for Lacerda. So this was kind of an easier one to get back into from a rules point of view. I will say my main problem with this one is just, I mentioned, I want to tweak the difficulty and make it like, easy, normal, hard, or something like that. I swear this one was ratcheted up to impossible, and there's no other way to treat the difficulty of this. Maybe I suck at the game, I don't know, but I've beaten multiplayer opponents before. But Lacerda just ratchets up points like nobody's business in this one. I mean, he's already getting points for free at the start. Every time he does something, he gets more points. He gets to nickel your renown cubes all the time. And then when you get to the fair
he just storms, doesn't he?
Ridiculous. I mean, you have to go out of your way to make your wine good quality and make it good at the fair. Whereas all he does is basically goes, right, automatically nicks the stall that gives a bonus. And what's on the vintage tile? That's his starting fair points. And it could be somewhere as high as 9. To put it in perspective, if you are getting anywhere above 5 or 6 fair points, that's typical of what you're getting, like if you're not focusing on it too much. You've got to go out of your way with wine experts and everything to get double-digit fair points. And just the starting vintage tile could give Lacerda 8 or 9. It's like, come on, seriously? It's madness. And when you get to the end of the game, you've got that tier system at the end of like, how well did you do? But it's like, I don't care about the tier system even less at this point because I can't even beat him on victory points, let alone get the tier system right.
And I think that's it. This one, out of all of them, it's probably one of the ones I played the most, although I've not played it for a good few months until we were doing this video. It feels almost the most arbitrary out of all of them. We have a decent solo AI deck, which kind of moves... he obviously moves Lacerda around on there. But you're absolutely right. He starts with 19 points. You get to that first fair, and he just storms away. I was playing it earlier on today, and I think on the first fair, as you said, I scored 6 points, and I think he was on 12 or 13 by the end of this. And it feels, from a solo perspective, like I'm playing a game of catch-up through this. Now, does that mean I don't enjoy this game? And absolutely not. Because I think this is I don't drink wine. If this was about whiskey, this would be really in my wheelhouse. I don't drink wine. So therefore, this game has to speak to me on a certain level, which obviously Viticulture, one of the most boring games in the world, didn't speak to me about on a certain level. But Vinhos absolutely does. I fully understand the interplay between each action on this. And from a non-wine person, that makes a real difference for me. I can understand what I'm doing from the beginning and what I'm trying to achieve. But you're right, it's kind of impeded a little bit by that solo, by Lacerda effectively cheating. Every space he leaves, you effectively have to bribe him one Bago to go on that space. I think it's arbitrary. From what I understand, and I've not played it multiplayer, there's a couple of key items on here. Is the as you mentioned earlier, the use of renown cubes that other players can do, and also the jockeying for first place when you take a rest action as well is quite important in multiplayer. In solo player, it's almost unnecessary. Basically, it doesn't really matter that much. Really, it has a little bit of an impact, but not too much. Yeah,
it does nothing because he doesn't care about any other stall apart from the +3 fair points. As if he doesn't get enough fair points as it is, he always goes for that one, and it it kind of works to that front. Although we'll just interrupt at the moment. We do, as much as we were plugging Paul earlier, he has turned up. And already his first thing to do is to moan at me about the fact that advance warning wasn't given as a Patreon support or something like that. It's like, I'm not the best at notifying on Patreon, I'll give it that. But I mean, I did it on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube enough. So
Paul is like the YouTube equivalent of the Candyman. You say his name 3 times and he's going to appear on a stream somewhere. And welcome you are as well, Paul. Yes, and your Jaffa cakes. Yeah.
Well, he says he wants to withdraw his offer on the basis of that, just because I didn't send him a Patreon message of this update. Although, tune back 10, 15 minutes into this when both of us are basically like praising you like crazy, and then give me back my Jaffa cakes. So you will give me Jaffa cakes after you listen to us praise you for ages. But yeah, so back to Vinhos. The theme of this works. I do love wine. I love cider. I love wine. Those are my 2 alcoholic beverages of choice. But I don't need to understand a thing about wine to know how this theme works. You could never drink wine, but I think everybody knows that you get grapes and turn it into wine, and it's all about smell, taste, and all that. I mean, all that just makes sense. And the economic side of this, okay, I need money to afford everything. That's just common knowledge. So teaching this game has probably been one of the easier ones to do, and it from a Lacerda perspective. And I enjoyed coming back to this. I love the fair part of it. I mean, but again, this one just pigeonholes you into a specific route. You have to, I mean, forgetting the tier system, the tier system's one thing, like, oh, I must achieve everything, otherwise I'm told I suck. I just ignore that. But you've got all these different tiles here that you can get for scoring opportunities. And in a multiplayer game, you can really specialize and do certain things. Like, do I want to just export wine for points? Okay, cool. I might just ignore the fair for a bit then. Or maybe the fair is like my bread and butter. I'm going to win every time at that fair. That's where my points are going for these majorities. Cool. Maybe I'm not too much about either. Maybe I just want to focus on a few of these purple tiles, really munchkin a couple of things and go for that. You have some leeway to not necessarily fully specialize, but go down a different path to someone else.
Yeah.
With the solo, you cannot. You must do well at the fair. If you let the Lacerda run away with the fair, you've lost. Yeah. But then he's also exporting wine and doesn't have to care about any of the prerequisites. So by the time you get to the end of the game, the Lacerda has at least won one of those majority columns in there, and probably drawn with you on another. You might have won one or something if you're fortunate.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to earn his barrels. You've got to get your barrels. Lacerda doesn't. So everything's already basically on easy mode for him. And I know that it's meant to be a challenge, but there's challenge and then there's Ghost Stories hell mode. Okay. So there's a limit. And that's just what puts me off a bit with this particular game, is having to deal with that so much. I just find that problematic.
Yeah, I think it's got to be applauded, though. I think this is one of the ones where you can see a significant amount of thought has gone into the solo mode here. The fact they've created a solo deck, and therefore there are these interconnecting actions, doesn't always feel as disconnected as some solo modes, and certainly some Lacerda solo modes, where it's not necessarily going off and doing its own thing. It does feel like it's gunning for you, but gunning for you, it's really got all its pals with it, basically, as it's trying to take you over. I think the solo in this would benefit from something like the scoring mechanism in CO2 or maybe in Kanban, where they are trying to ruin rather than you trying to keep up with their score, they're trying to ruin your reputation. So I think a diminishing score in this would work a lot better. It would feel thematic. If the AI is going out and winning every wine fair, then surely your reputation is going. If your reputation is going, your VP should go down. So maybe start at 20 or 30 points or whatever it is, and have a diminishing score. That might make it feel more engaging there. But yeah, I do like it. I think it's easy to start picking apart these solo modes, but I think as a Lacerda solo mode, before maybe one or two others that I played, this was right at the top for me. This was up there as a solo mode. It engaged me irrespective of the challenge. I never go into Vinhos expecting to win it solo, but I still enjoy the challenge that it provides me.
Yeah, the game is fun, and it's not the hardest solo mode to manage, so it does well from that aspect. I'm glad it doesn't necessarily work with the 2010 version, because I don't think I'd want to bother too much. Sorry, I was like lump in the throat there. Hang on, that's better. Right, but no, I enjoyed this one from a solo perspective, and it's just if it just wasn't so hard. I mean, I've got to house rule the difficulty in this to get as much love out of it, and I think if it just had some way to ease the difficulty, then this one would be kind of on top on there. So I mean, looking at some of the reactions, we'll start off with the obvious that you're wrong about viticulture. Although I don't think Grogan's a fan of it either, so I suppose you've got a supporter there.
It's boring, it's so dull.
leave my viticulture alone. So, most people are sort of enjoy both, but trying to see what else is down here for Vinhos as well. Most people are having trouble finding it, I must admit. I think this one's been out for a while.
It has, but I think it depends where you are in the world. I know that a lot of Eagle Griffin games, not mainly down to demand supply, and also down to the recent changes in Brexit in the UK, they've been exceptionally difficult to get hold of in the UK. I'm sure that Eagle Griffin do print runs on these all the times, and I see them around Europe when I'm looking to pick one up. You look on the websites in Europe, and I think they're readily available in the States. In the UK, though, they are very difficult to track down at the moment. That may change. Yeah,
we got over there. Paul just being a heathen with Paul's from closer to my original neck of the woods, as you know. Like, he's from Devon, I'm from Somerset originally, and so cider is my bread and butter there. Obviously, it sounds like he doesn't care about wine. I hope he likes cider, though, because if he doesn't, then, there goes all the respect. It's like, come on, you got to like one of those two alcoholic beverages. And apparently, we're already invited up to London or so. We're going to, somebody homemade grape wine or something. You know what? I'll take you up on that, actually, when all this is over. Post lockdown, can we come round, enjoy some of your wine and play some games? I think that would be cool. Now, somebody mentioned like the viticulture one. I don't know if that's a sucker. No, it's a good game. Don't listen to this man. But I'm not going to like go into it madly, but just basically look at that. It's a Stonemaier Euro midweight winemaking. Check out some videos on it. I think I've talked about it in my like top 10 and 20 of my top 100 and that. But like I say, watch some videos on it. It's definitely a lighter version of Vinhos, and it's certainly more readily available, shall we say.
And that is a true worker placement game, isn't it? Rather than an action selection game, I believe. Yes.
Yeah, that is the thing. All these Lacerda ones are essentially action selection. As much as they say put a worker somewhere, it's like, no, it's not. It's I'm choosing this action. Here's my piece to say I'm doing it. Right, now we'll hand the reins over to Mark, because we're going to go on to one that I don't own. So, I do not own this one.
No, I don't need to pull the box up. It's fine. It's hid behind stuff.
You won't need it, because I'll bring it up on the screen in that. But this is one of the more recent ones that Lacerda brought out. Escape Plan, which is essentially like the mafia themed one of trying to escape from a city after essentially I try to remember the theme itself, but it's a heist. You're trying to explain to that, and not a favourite of mine, as that free rating says. This is not a favourite of mine, but because I obviously don't own the game and have not played the solo mode, this is when Mark gets to shine and tell us all about it. And I'm not going to interrupt him by saying you're wrong. This is like let Mark give this game praise or not. I don't know what you think of the solo mode actually. So
yeah, this is true. So escape plan. You play as a solo player, but obviously with multiplayer, you play somebody who has committed a heist, and your aim is to get out of the city after a 3-day period. But you can't get out at certain exits because certain exits are blocked, and you have to get to the end of these 3 days to find out which exits you can get out of the city. The police, the SWAT team, and other forces are trying to hone in on you as well. So if you move across the tiles of this city, you then have to effectively either avoid or combat. I say combat, it's very loose combat, you take wounds. Police or SWAT teams. There is also in the solo mode, and this is where we start to see multiple AIs, which are done to such great effect in Kanban EV, which we'll talk about. There are 2 AIs that you play against as well. There is Sandra. Now, if you played the original Kanban or Kanban EV, you'll know Sandra and how she works. She's not a true AI as such. She has some cards in escape plan. She's a police officer or a police investigator, and she's traveling around the city, and she can cause things to happen like closing down of certain buildings, etc., which stop you getting money. And you need a certain amount of money to win the game and leave the city at the end of it as well. But as well as that, there is also another AI, a crooked cop in the name of Costa. So you're managing 2 AIs here. And Costa is going to kind of hone in on you. You're going to pull cards from his deck, and he's either going to appear on your tile where you are or in an adjacent tile to you. And if he's on your tile, or if you pass through his tile where he is, you then have to pay him $3,000. So he bribes you to kind of pass through the space. So he's trying to do things the same as Sandra, close down businesses, stop you earning money. But he's also crooked as well. And his aim is to get out of the city on day 3 and ultimately have more money than you have as well. So this is where this kind of the scoring is ever so slightly different. I think there's tiered scoring in it, but what you have to do essentially is the first thing you have to do is get out of the city and beat Costa beat the amount of money you got against Costa there. Now, as you can see from the board, it's a number of hex tiles. These are brought out kind of randomly throughout the game, semi-randomly. There is an order to it, and you place them on the board to create these various areas, and you can move across through the water or through the kind of city or through the parks, etc. And you can see all the little black and red meeples and blue meeples there, the police chasing after you. You have various businesses. You're collecting cash. You are potentially collecting bits of equipment that are going to help you, keys to safe houses, which you can use in lockers to get more money at the end of the game. And I think I will say that this is possibly, from a solo perspective, the Lacerda game I've played the most solo. Does that make it the best Lacerda game? No, and I think this is where Luke will come in with his thoughts on the multiplayer and potentially why not. It is a light affair. It is a B movie that you're effectively playing here, but the solo works really, really well. And before we discuss that, I'll probably back over to Luke to ask him his thoughts on why he wasn't bought into Escape Plan from multiplayer.
Yeah, I mean, I won't go mad on it because obviously we're talking solos in here. But the first thing is one that I gave Ian O'Toole praise for artwork and that earlier and that. And artwork is subjective, but I just think Escape Plan is butt ugly. Like, this map layout and all the tiles and that, I just think is ugly. I do not get the look for this game at all. I just could not get into this like tile map system with that. I mean, some of the cards and tiles aren't too bad, and the graphic design is okay, but it was just like I'm trying to find the grid map again. I just can't get into that. But that's that's an artwork part of it. With this one, it was supposedly a shorter, lighter affair, but I didn't think it was that light. I mean, it's not like this is it's not like this is a midweight. This is still a heavy game. It's just less heavy than the other ones. It still took many hours to do. I mean, Paul taught us this one, like I mentioned, the first time I played it, and like subsequent times was different. But it still took a long time for the game to work. Theme is not my favourite. I'm not a big Mafia fan. That's a minor quibble because, like I say, I'm not exactly an art gallery fan either, but that didn't matter. With this, I didn't feel like what you were doing in the game was that interesting, though, because some of the turns you get to, and it's literally, I'll move my guy to this casino and drop a cube down. That's it. It's like, okay, I have fulfilled this criteria of having something on the casino. It's like, whoopee-doo. But then even like a lot of the actions just didn't seem like they were that fulfilling. I mean, here you go. Yeah, you got these different locations you can go to. Get down there and get a cube on it. Whoopee. It's like I'm not actually betting at the casino. I'm just like dropping a cube down. The police force that you've got to dodge in it, I think, are more inept than most 90s, 80s buddy cop movies. It's like they just do not do anything to hamper you, I think. You can run rings around them. It's like, I don't know whether that was just convenient in our games, but I've just yet to see them put up a massive resistance. And the turn sequence in this game put me off as well, because you have, was it, 3 actions normally? I forget.
Yeah, 3 actions plus some executive actions like you do in most Lacerda games, and maybe some additional actions, should I say, if you've got the if you've opened up the action disc, the extra action disc. Yeah. That's
the thing, the additional actions, because yes, in Gallerist you can get a bonus action, but you kind of know it's there. Here, you've got I think you normally have 3 in a round, but there's a good way to get 1 or 2. But if you're one of those people who doesn't have those bonus actions and other people have got 1 or 2, you're sitting there on downtime for quite a while waiting for it to actually get back to you to do something. And then my turn is go to this hex and drop a cube down in the vault. It's like, bleh. It didn't work for me as well as the other Lacerdas, and I get what they were trying to do with this, but all that stuff coming together just soured the thing with this. So I had no interest in picking this up for a solo mode. And a lot of people still like escape plans, so I'm not exactly going to say like, oh yeah, word is gospel on that. There are some fans of this one, but I think after I'd come off a high on all this lot, this one just didn't kind of work for me. But the sound of it, I mean, you enjoy it much more, obviously.
Absolutely, yeah.
But
I think. Sorry, go on. Yeah.
Well, I mean, is the solo mode? So is this like one of your better solo modes?
It is. It is. I think this is possibly my second favorite Lacerda solo mode. The use of the 3 AI in this, the fact that you're not chasing victory points around. I mean, you are effectively building up cash, but you're not chasing victory points. The use of these 2 AI that you're playing against, Costa and Sandra, really add thematically to this. From a theme perspective, it feels like it should really just be a solo game. It shouldn't be 4 different people from high swinging around the city having the same kind of stuff. The police and the SWAT teams as a solo player work more, I think, than they do potentially. It's harder to avoid them as a solo player, maybe, because you can do other things with multiplayers. As a solo player, towards the back end of the game, you start to feel a little bit swamped by where the police are placed.
Yeah, we had like 4 or 5 players, I think, in each time, so it was like insane. Don't play this with 5.
And the fact that the map, the layout is emergent and it's dynamic really adds to this as well. I've had games which have been relatively short because of how the map is laid out, and it's just ended up that I've been relatively close to the main exit or the exit I need to use at the end of the game. And I've had other ones where it's turned out I've got to cross the entire board. I've got to jump in helicopters. I've got to go on the river. I've got to avoid. I've got to take wounds. I've got to use biker gangs. It just gives me that B-movie feel. And I really appreciate what Vital did here in the fact that it's so left of field to what else he's done. It is an action movie. It is not Die Hard, but it is a Bad Boys kind of movie, if you like. It's paper thin on plot, and that doesn't matter because I enjoy this journey so much. And so when people ask me about which Lacerda game I recommend for solo, I want to say that the Gallerist is the better game. Obviously, it is. Vinhos is the better game. I really enjoy the solo in Escape Plan, potentially more than I do the solo in some of those better games. And that's where when we spoke at the beginning about a great solo mode and a great game don't always marry up. And I think this is the perfect iteration of that. I would recommend this for solo. I'm sorry if people are going to go out there and spend 80 or 90 quid on this. Don't do that on my saying that. From my perspective,
too late.
Yeah, they're already there with a credit card. Yeah, this is one of the ones that I would absolutely recommend for solo. I would recommend Gallerist if you're definitely going to play it with other people. Lisboa, maybe I need more experience with that. Vinhos, maybe, but this, I think it possibly, and I haven't played it multiplayer, but I think it possibly works better solo than it does multiplayer.
That could be the case. I mean, I've played it multiplayer like several times and just did not like. I tried to gave it like second, third chance to say like, come on, there's got to be something I'm missing here because I like all these other Lacerdas. Why is this one not gelling with me? And it still didn't manage to grab me in that. One other problem I did have is that I didn't think this was very intuitive compared to a lot of the other ones. I mean, a lot of I thought a lot of the iconography and stuff that I was seeing all over the place just for some reason I just couldn't get it. It was like, oh, what does that do again? What's that symbol mean? Or what am I supposed to do in order to get points here? It didn't quite gel as well. But then I know very little about heist movies. So I do not watch that as a genre. I don't know whether that helps.
I think for me, this possibly was the one that was easiest for me to relearn. I whizzed through the rulebook again on this and just got straight back into playing it. Whereas, Vinhos on Mars. On Mars, I maybe shouldn't have left until the very last Lacerda game to relearn. I should have done that first. But this, I whizzed through, and but I get that it's different for a lot of people. How the iconography works, etc. But for me, I do love it. Yeah,
because I'm looking at that stuff, and I can't even remember what half of that does. But I mean, obviously you got to get used to it. But it could maybe work better as a solo mode. I mean, I can see what you're saying, that the police force would be a bit more of a hassle. Yeah, I do get that. When I played it, I thought, why are there 4 or 5 of us running around after doing the same heist? It's like, what kind of thing is this? But I could see the idea that, all right, I've done the heist. Now I've got to get out and deal with all this stuff and do it in my own way. So, I mean, yeah, I can see the merit of perhaps I need to try it. Well, I can't see myself ever trying this solo. I mean, I don't think the solo is going to suddenly blow my mind if I didn't like the multiplayer game of this. Yeah. But, yeah, it does sound like that this is... Because actually, when I do hear people say, I like Escape Plan... I do seem to see that they prefer it solo. Like, I mean, it's appearing on Facebook and that as, I'm playing Escape Plan solo and I'm loving it. So maybe this one was better designed as a solo game compared to the multiplayer. And it's like, rather than some of the others we've talked about where it's like, probably better multiplayer than it is solo. This one's kind of the opposite way around.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
I must say that HexyBeast mentions like, will it fit on my table? And it's like, seriously, have you not played an Eagle Griffin Lacerda game? All of them have ridiculous table presses. It's like, if anything, this one's probably conservative compared to some of the other ones.
I think I know Johnny's just got Johnny at the HexyBeast, a great channel, by the way, great solo channel. Go and check Johnny at HexyBeast out. I know he's just got CO2 as his first Lacerda game, and I think if you make CO2 fit, you'll probably make this fit, Johnny. Yeah. There you go. That's the scale there. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, that's fitting on a tidy table. Presumably, that's going to be a 2. Actually, no, that looks like a solo game setup. I can't see a second player board.
Yeah, that is. It's got Costa out there, so Costa can be used in 1 or 2 players. Or is it just solo? No, it's got Costa, Sandra, he. They have got Costa and Sandra set out there, and the solo. So that's it for solo. Yeah.
Well, there you go. That's a standard size table. If you can fit it on that, you can fit it on most kitchen tables, I would imagine. So that's a standard 4-person table, and even then, that's cramped for a 4-person table, so I reckon it's perfectly doable. Although, well, we'll get onto that. And actually, shall we make that the next one? Yeah, I think we will make that the next one, actually, because what you said about Costa and Sandra is a factor with this next Lacerda game, and I got to admit, this has only started appearing in the recent ones, because I think Escape Plan was the next recent before. Actually, no, when did Escape Plan come out?
Escape Plan was before on Mars. So Escape Plan was at Essen 2019, I believe, and then
it was. So on Mars doesn't have this, so it kind of skipped a beat before they put back in. But the one that I've certainly been looking forward to talking about there, the brand new one. So Kanban EV, the one that was jostling for my favorite Lacerda for a long time, and I couldn't tell which one I liked more. One was a lot easier to get into than the other, but one has a better theme, one had slightly better mechanics, but the other one was more streamlined. Both worked so well, and I just couldn't tell which ones I liked more. It's even harder now with this EV version, because for a while Gallerist took the lead, because the Stronghold version did have some issues with it, mainly for learning the game, because the rulebook was not great. When the designer has to put a geek list on Board Game Geek to explain the rules, that says it all. And every time I went back to Kanban, the Stronghold version, it was hard to figure out, how do I learn this game again? So when this one was getting a reprint, can you imagine the buzz I was feeling waiting for this one to come out? I mean, I was impatiently waiting for this. I didn't back it on Kickstarter because of the cost, but when it was coming out to retail, it's like, gimme. I was like, I want this game. And with Kanban, you as I said, it is a car factory game. So this one is based off the premise of like just basically efficiency is everything. That's essentially, I forget what the word Kanban stands for, but I mean, just think efficiency, pure efficiency.
Just in time, isn't it? That kind of stuff, basically. Yeah. So.
Yeah, it's like everything is just in time. So when you're ordering parts, you're getting them as and when you need them or something, as opposed to having a stockpile that you don't need. But with this game, you are in a car factory. So your job, obviously, get the most VPs, but you're doing everything you would expect to do in a car factory. You're building and testing cars. So you've got different departments that you can work in. So you got to get the blueprints. Right, fine. I'm going to make this car. I'm going to make an SUV. I need the parts. Right, well, let's go to the logistics and get some parts. Right, I've got the parts. Right, well, let's go to assembly and make the cars. Get them on the conveyor belts there on the top right. And then once they're out on the test track, go test them out, claim them for your garage, or upgrade the parts so that in the concept car, the brakes are ridiculously good. In the mini electric people car, or whatever, like the smart car. I'm trying to remember what half the parts are. Sorry, but like I say, the chassis is really good. Whatever. You basically get to upgrade the parts, and it feels exactly as that feels. I mean, you've already got half the game just by the theme alone. That's how strong the theme is in that. And granted, I like cars a lot more than I like art galleries and heist movies. So, yes, the themes I have watched every episode of Top Gear and Grand Tour that's ever been released. It's like, I like cars. So, this one certainly does. This is the only car. Oh, no, Automania. I've got that one. So, I do like car themes. But with this one, the action selection in the multiplayer is you just basically choose which department you want to work in. And it's action selection at the end of the day. But I'm trying to find the central part of the board. This is mainly going for all the departments, but you pick where you want to go. You've got a couple of spaces for each. You've got shifts as your action points per se, and it tells you what you can do in each one. So grab blueprints and design, go grab parts and logistics. And it is very much an efficiency game because you have to choose a different department every turn because the company policy is you can't work the same department twice. And you're trying to be more efficient than the other players. I mean, this is definitely an efficiency theme puzzle.
Yeah.
One of the best things I love about it, though, is Sandra, who comes around, and this is where Sandra first originated. It is a character that goes from department to department and assesses people based on what they've done. Now, you can play her in nice mode or mean mode. Always play her in meme mode because that's the more fun way to play it. Everybody's had that boss that they just want to strangle because it's like the boss will not let up. You're constantly telling me I'm doing a rubbish job or so. Maybe that's just me, I don't know. But she goes to each department and assesses each person, whoever's done the least amount of training. And if you haven't met a certain amount, like this is basically, ironically, this is the tier system as a game mechanic. Because I just mentioned about, you've got to have 2 of this and 2 of this, and I hate that as a scoring system. Well, that's essentially the mechanic of this game. She comes around and says, do you have at least 2 free parts in your logistics? Nope. Well, nah. Do you have at least 3 blueprints? Do you have at least this? But it's coming, and you prepare for it. You either have what she wants, or you just make certain you're more trained than the other players. Yeah. And so when she does come around and penalise you victory points, you're like, it's like, God damn it, Sandra. It's like irritating character, but thematically it just works so well. So when you get to the solo mode, how's that work? Well, going back to what was just said about escape plan, you've got Lacerda and Turksy, because I think David Turksy had a hand with this solo mode, so naturally he's got to feature in the game. But it's the idea of having 2 mods, and this is the flip side of the board. You can play it in monochrome setting. I don't know why you would. I'm sure the color version is just fine. But the 2 bots have an AI deck that dictates what actions they'll do, where they'll generally go, and what spaces they'll go on, and the decision tree with it. I mean, it's a very well laid out AI card in terms of what it is. And it's quite smooth to run. If you know how to play multiplayer Kanban, it's pretty easy to implement the AI deck, although you do have to micromanage a few different, what does each person do on each particular action. It's a little bit of a learning curve, but it's not too bad. But the bots effectively not only get in your way, they're obviously claiming cars. They are very well simulating multiplayer opponents. They're nicking the blueprints you wanted to get. They're claiming the cars you wanted. They're moving the assembly line in the way you don't want to happen. They're gaining... And the weird twist with this is that they don't gain victory points. Instead, every time they gain points, you lose them. And you're basically trying to finish the game on a positive note. which is cool. There's a different twist. And if you fall below 0 at any point at the end of the round, you're fired and you automatically lose. Although, good luck actually getting fired unless you put this on a stupid difficulty. We'll go on to that. But when I got this, it's like the first thing I did was bring it out solo. Because obviously with lockdown and that. But I was excited for this one. I thought, please don't let me down, because I had those previous issues with the other ones. I wanted this one to be like the killer solo mode. And as I played through the solo mode with the AI deck, I was like, yes, come on. This is a great solo mode. I love this AI deck. This is simulating the best multiplayer experience out of all of the Lacerdas in terms of what other players would do, because they're unpredictable. You don't know what they're... you can see what actions they might take, but then you have a different randomizer deck to say, oh, they're going to go for the top card or the bottom card. So you get that fear of, oh, there's a good chance they're going to go to design and they're going to nick my blueprints. Oh, do I go there first then? I don't know. Take a risk, and then you take a risk and they don't go there, or they do go there. And that is great.
Yeah.
And for all that solo mode, as I played this, I was thinking, this is 10 out of 10 solo mode. I love this game already. It's a 10 out of 10. And I thought this solo mode is fantastic. Got to the end. Won easily. I think like 50 something points or something by the end. I played on the easiest mode. You can tweak the difficulty by using these cards, which is great. I wanted that. Just give me difficulty cards to make the game harder. And then I found the tier system. It's like, for crying out loud. And yes,
just let me win the game.
It did. It's like, I won the game, I beat you, and apparently I'm an intern because I decided to not have two tested designs. It's like, excuse me, I'm not going to belabor the point. I've already ham-fisted this like crazy, but it's just, I specialized on doing this in the game. I chose a path. The game says I suck because I didn't do the tier system, and that is a pain. I can forgive it, though, in this one because it has... well, A, a really good AI system in general. B, you are still playing to a point threshold. You must get positive points.
Yeah.
But also, you have a difficulty set of cards. You've got about 9 or 10 of them. They give bonuses to Lacerda and Turksey. And basically, you can you can tweak the difficulty as much as you like by just throwing in some of those cards.
Yeah.
Great. So I can literally, with this one, say, screw the tier system, ignore it, doesn't exist, and just say, well, I won by 50-something points there. That seemed pretty easy. Fine, let's throw in a couple of difficulty cards. Oh, I barely won by the skin of my teeth. Perfect. Yeah. If I just ignore the tier system, this is hands down my favorite solo mode.
Yeah.
Out of all of the Lacerdas.
And I am going to 100% disagree. Agree with you here.
Oh, God. You said this. You had me there for a second.
I think this gives... It's brilliant Lacerda, almost peak Lacerda, at the same time as handing the reins of the solo mode onto David Turczi, who then created a solo mode that a game like this truly deserves. And if I've got one thing to say to the guys at Eagle Griffin and Vital is, go back to David, get him to release a solo mode for all of the games.
All the others, yes.
Or do a connoisseurs solo mode collection where you've got David and maybe, I don't know, newcomers like Drake Villarreal creating solo modes for these games and giving them the solo modes they deserve, because there is just so much interplay. There is so much thought gone into this solo mode. The fact that, as you say, you're not... Yeah, victory points are important. Getting those points and winning the game are important, but that's not the major hurdle. The first major hurdle is not getting fired. And you mentioned it was difficult to get fired. Trust me, as somebody who was new to the game, hadn't played Kanban at all before. My first two games, I think, or 3 games, I got fired. I think in my first game, I got fired at the end of the first meeting.
That's fair enough. I mean, I've had experience playing this multiplayer, so I know the gist of what's going on. If you come into this brand new, I could see how getting fired is possible.
Absolutely. The genius stroke is having Turczi, Lacerda, and Sandra all playing against you. Now, you mentioned, Luke, where you when you choose your action, are you going to go there, or is that where Lacerda's going to go, or Turczi's going to go? You've got maybe a 33% chance of knowing where that is, because it's going to be one of 2 cards, basically, out of a deck of 3, out of a line of 3 at any point. So you can do some mitigation there and thinking about where they're going to get played. But you've also got to put into that wherever you go, that could knock Sandra down on her turn onto the go below, and Sandra is the timer here. So Sandra, and I think this is wonderfully fantastic, the female character in a male-dominated car world is actually the most powerful person or the most powerful character in this game. Sandra is going to assess you. Sandra is the timer mechanism. Sandra is the one that you will have to impress in the meetings that you have as well. I think that's a fantastic thing here. But linking back into this solo, it's touched upon in Escape Plan, where you have 2 AIs. You've got Costa and Sandra. Here, where you effectively have 3 AIs. Sandra's not a proper AI. It makes this. Yeah, she's just like a timing mechanism, if you like, or she's a game mechanism.
She just exists. She's in the multiplayer game as well, but you can lead her on, and obviously the multiplayer has that. In the solo mode is essentially there's 2 colleagues, but Lacerda. They both do similar actions. It's just Lacerda gets the more powerful version of the action and the better spot, whereas Turksy is a little bit less. But they are still effectively together. And for some reason, don't ask me why, I could invent some very dubious, controversial reasons why the rulebook states that Lacerda and Turksy are on good terms with Sandra. Because Sandra basically ignores them. Like, they don't have to worry about meeting the goals or anything. They're like teacher's pet. And it's just like, why are you picking on me and these 2 are fine, huh? Answer that. But
you're new
it's
to
just
the
like I'm the new guy, therefore pick on me and these 2 are that. But it's essentially like it's that cheating thing. It's like they get to cheat, but still not in the worst possible cheating way. It's not like, oh, they get 1,000,000 points and everything's easy for them. They just circumnavigate that one thing. Yeah. They still have to adhere to general rules about what blueprints they take and what parts they use and where they go on the assembly line. And there is a lot of iconography to that you learn. Granted, the AI cards have got that, and I'm not going to say that this is the easiest solo mode to get into, because I had the advantage of knowing how Kanban works ahead of time. If I came into this from scratch, yes, you would have a fair bit of micromanagement with, all right, so hang on, so he's going to design. What does he do when he gets to design? He does this, and that. And there is a bit of that.
Yeah.
So it's a bit more of a learning curve. But, man, the theme is still strong. The AI deck works well. And as I say, I like David Turtsy's solo modes in general. Some games do better with them than others. The board and dice is kind of his shtick. And some of those solo modes are quite complex to run. With the T games, Taiwan Tinsuyu, Teotihuacan, and all that lot. It's like, they're good solo modes, but I'm like, blimey, I got to micromanage a lot here. This is like quite thick. For some reason, this one just felt smoother. Don't know why, though. Mark, you've muted yourself.
Have you got me now? Yeah, you got me now.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yep.
So I think there's a couple of things on this. First of all, I'll talk about the theme. I have 0 interest in cars, none whatsoever. But I love this game. It makes perfect sense to me. Completely perfect sense to me. I've got a car. I drive a car. That's as much as I know. It's a hybrid, so it kind of fits in with here. It's a hybrid, but it makes perfect sense to me. The theme absolutely works, and every action that happens in here with Lacerda, with Turkey, with Sandra makes perfect sense. I can really work out from this iconography what I need to do. I need to get some of the car plans. I need to upgrade the components. I need to push those cars through the factory and score victory points. And it all makes sense. And you've got a little racetrack going around as well, where you got the test track going round. It's all thematically absolutely fits in. The key stroke in this is and it's very difficult with any solo mode, is to try and replicate a multiplayer experience. By having these 2 guys who are gunning for you, you're the new guy, they want to get you fired. By having these two opponents gunning for you, trying to get you fired, it's a great first hurdle that you've got to overcome. Now, midway through the game, you kind of not that bothered about getting assessed by Sandra, because you probably hit most of the criteria that she's looking for. Early on in the game, you're sacrificing stuff. You're saying, I'm going to get assessed. Yeah.
I'm usually like kind of like half and half. It's like I will be happy to get assessed by her like for half the stuff I'm doing, but then there'll be a couple of areas where like I'm just doing this when I can, and then it's like, right, I need to make certain I'm trained up on there. But the AI trains up quick, particularly Lacerda, so it's not like you can stay ahead of them the entire game. You need to keep on track of the certifications, and it all just kind of works. If anything, the only weak aspect I have for it is the way the meetings are handled, because they essentially just from left to right get automatic like well, Lacerda gets the top multiplier, whereas Turksey gets the basic multiplier. Doesn't matter if they've done the prerequisite or not. That's a little bit like too much cheating. It's like, excuse me, I'm the one who got these cars in my garage. He didn't do jack. So how's he getting all the bonus? But I suppose thematically, you could say that they're stealing the credit from you. I mean, these two, in real life, Lacerda and Turksey are nice people. I think in this game, they're utter gits. It's like because they are basically trying to steal the credit. So I suppose thematically that does work. But
yeah, I think for me, it's not only is it Pete Lacerda, it's my favourite Lacerda in a very short amount of time. From a solo perspective, it's my favourite Lacerda. It's my favourite Lacerda solo, certainly. And I think what David did here with the introduction of this very David Turchi solo deck is just marry theme and usability and solo ability so perfectly together, create this wonderful experience. The game, once you know it, you can play this game in about an hour, basically. It's not a long game to play. And then once you played it, you can reset it very, very quickly and go right back in there again. And that is a really good, strong point about this game.
It is a good reset. I mean, people say that, I can play the solo game in an hour. I've never played any of these solo games in an hour, but then I guess I'm taking a while to think about my turns, and then I'm also including a lot of rules checking and the setup in that as well. I mean, it's not like I could get this out and finish it and wrap it up in an hour. It's like that's not going to happen. It's going to take a bit longer, particularly if you're rules checking. But yeah, I mean, the actual experience, it's not taking too long. I kind of hovered around this one because this is an example of one of those stupid tier things on there. This is the second highest. Okay, this is the second highest tier that you need to achieve in order to do the CEO, right? 50 points or more after final scoring. I did achieve that in my first game. Okay, I got more than that just. But 5 different cars. I had three different cars. Tested designs that have a total value of 30 points or more. I had one tested design the entire game.
8 bank shifts.
Yeah, 8. Getting any bank shifts is not easy. And if you're going to end the game with 8 bank shifts, that means you pretty much never spent them. And if you're not spending these bank shifts, then shame on you. Because yes, they're a point at the end of the game, but extra actions are better than a point. So I want to spend them. And this is basically telling you that if you want to achieve the highest rank, you can never spend them. There's no way you'll have 8, like just swimming through. And then 5 certifications, that's an easier one. Because usually I end the game with multiple certifications.
But I think there's probably going to be people screaming who are watching this at some point saying, of course you can do that. These people who play very, very lean, the true nature of the game, if you like. But that's not me. And I think that comes about the fact I can not set it up and play it, but I can play a game in about an hour. Is obviously I should take a lot longer to think about my decisions and my actions than I actually do. But the artwork, let's just go back to that box of Ian O'Toole, that Kanban EV box. It is stunning to look at, isn't it? That box, the white, the red card, broken down into constituent parts. It's just beautiful.
I agree with Shane. This one is like, I mean, we say we had it confirmed. Yeah, it's just in time. It was a Japanese influence. That was what I was aware of there. A lot of people are kind of sort of this will be their first Lacerda. The interesting thing that Carla said is that it looks amazing, but I have the stronghold version, and it's hard to justify getting this when I have the old one. I had the old one. I even upgraded that to the driver's edition. It is sitting somewhere on a pile that I will be selling because the Eagle Griffin version is an upgrade to that one in every way. Yes, the rules are 99% identical. So if you know how to play one, you'll play the other. But this is easier to learn because of a more improved rulebook. The better graphic design. I can see what everything's doing on the board. The artwork is just ridiculous steps above the original one. The component quality is a step up. The AI is included now, which is a great step up. The rule tweaks that they do have are very minor. You could house rule them, but still, it's nice to have them there. I don't care about the supercharger expansion. It's in the box. I doubt I'll ever use it in that. It's just a small thing. But like I said, I understand that the cost is high, but if you're one of those people that's playing Kanban on a regular basis, I do recommend the upgrade, but that's entirely down to you. Certainly, if you have not got Kanban, well, I know I'm saying that as I'm trying to sell the other one there, but yeah, I do recommend if you can afford this one, get this one. Get the Stronghold version, if you want a cheaper version. This one
has, unlike any other Lacerda game, a proper solo player aid, which is just beautiful. It's got a couple of cards which tell you what Sandra does, what she does, what Turksy and Lacerda do in relation to where Sandra is on the board, it's great. You don't have to reference the book or 3 books or however many you do in On Mars. It's got a proper solo player aid as well.
Is this directed at you, this comment?
It is. So I
explain yourself.
It doesn't make anybody do anything. It's all about all that happened is obviously I backed the Kickstarter and I decided I was going to get these. You spend the extra £70 on the metal cards.
No,
I did. Are they necessary? Absolutely not.
I wouldn't even say they're that good.
But do you know what? They're utterly pointless, and I bloody love them. I won't play the game without them. So obviously, I posted the pictures. They look better than the wooden cards. Are they necessary? No, but they're great.
It's a subjective thing. It's just when I ordered this, they said like, "Oh, we've only got copies that have the metal cars. Are you okay for us to remove those and send you this one or something?" It's like, yeah, I'm not paying £60-70 for those metal cars. That's a ridiculous amount of money. But I think the wooden cars look fantastic. They've got the laser etching design. I just could not justify that £60-70. But it's like, how dare you force him to buy his or whatever you did.
I'm not
show them off,
ripping, guys. I can promise you that. Yeah.
And actually, Mark makes a good point. Would they actually scratch your board if they're made of metal? I don't know.
Well, I don't think so, because it would. You'd have to be pretty hefty with them to make them scratch your board. And, board games are a tactile experience. There's many things in board games, chits, etc. It's pretty much like cars in real life. People get really kind of up on the fact that they don't want to mind a dink or scratch in their car. For me, it's a car. And same with board games. I don't mind a little bit of love showing on the board.
Yeah. I think with these, because they cost so much, I'm a bit more picky. I mean, let's say, I want to get them. I just could not justify that price. I mean, I don't mind metal coins for an expensive upgrade. I just think the metal cars was kind of... It depends how big the disparity is between the wood and then that. I mean, if we were using cubes for cars, I'd get the metal cars in a second. But it's kind of like I'm going from the best that wood can provide to simply what's it made out of. So pick your poison. But yeah,
it's a luxury upgrade, definitely a luxury upgrade.
Right, noticing that we certainly have... Look, I mean, I don't care how long these things go on for, because frankly, I've given up trying to make them short. We got one more game to go over, and we'll see this. And yeah, this is the one that... This is going to be interesting, because I like this game as a multiplayer experience, but it is the 5th highest I rate out of all these ones, underneath Lisboa, and I think that's going to remain the case. Who knows what CO2 might do in the future and that. But On Mars is the more recent one, and everybody's going mad on it because of the expansion that they're planning for it. I have no interest in that expansion at all. Right. And that will become prevalent as we go through this and that. I gave it an 8 out of 10 when I first rated it, because I still think this is really cool game, great in that. But out of all the Lacerda games, and I watched your video on this, and you mentioned a little bit of this, but I also watched a few videos where, this is prototype
That's
version.
An early version, that isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, where's some pictures of the actual version? That's a bit better. But I like this game. It's well produced. The stuff you're doing in it is great. But oh my word, is this game ridiculously complicated? I mean, you had the problem earlier in the week. I had it this morning. I had a brain aneurysm trying to remember the rules to this game. It is so complex. It's ridiculous. No matter how much Paul does a great job at doing the rulebook and the video, it's still a ton to remember. If you don't play this game every week, you are going to have to relearn this game every time. And the solo mode is no different. But with On Mars, you're building up a colony on Mars. You've seen about 100 million Mars games. Do I really need to explain the theme, really? But you're building up the colony. You have got action selection as before, except you've got the left-hand side of the board is orbit, right-hand side is the planet. Different actions on each side, action selection, blocking by other players. But you have to time when you do actions with where the shuttle is. So you could start off in orbit, but you can't switch to the planet actions unless you get on the shuttle and land on the planet. And granted, I think that's a fantastic mechanism, and I love that as a thing. Get a bonus, turn order is important, and I love the idea that you've got to micromanage that, and as the game goes forward, the shuttle doesn't go to and from as often. So I thought that was brilliant. As I say, mechanically, I think the game is sound. But oh my word, there's so much to remember, and you've got to build up the colony. You've got different places that you can build. You've got contracts you can go after. You've got the bit on the right there with if you do certain things, the colony gets better and better. You've got the technology tiles. You've got getting rocket colonists in. You've got all these things to micromanage. And then we get onto the solo mode, where this is where you end up with a slight problem, because firstly, you've got to micromanage even more. You know, you've got a little AI deck that's very simplistic, but every action in this game has got what you already had to micromanage plus more micromanaging. It's like, oh my word. It's like trying to remember what everything does. I'm probably got the rules wrong 100 times trying to relearn this. But then with this one, this is kind of similar to the Gallerist, where it's not so much that you're beating an AI. The AI is literally just there to be a nuisance. And it has kind of less predictability than the Gallerist, but all it's essentially doing is its own thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can kind of ignore it. It's just there.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, oh, you're in orbit doing this slot then. Okay, well, fine. You have fun up there. I'll just sit down here on the planet and do what I need to do. So it's like, why is the AI even in this game? It doesn't seem to do it. And then when you get to the end, I can't remember. Yeah, you're not even trying to beat it on points. It's like, did you again go to those tier systems? That's pretty much the entire goal of the game. Is to adhere to those tier systems. So you basically, there we go. So we had a minor blip. That just happens if BT decides to be a pain. But yeah, this one just didn't feel very rewarding, especially for the amount of time I had to spend relearning these rules.
Yeah.
And this is actually causing a bit of a conundrum for me, because I had a joke recently where I had to get this on my shelf, and the Calyx can only fit 4 games in there. So the other one has to go below it alongside Mind Clash. But On Mars got relegated because I thought these are the 4 I prefer. After playing this solo, and I know that the solo mode is a weak aspect of this game, and you'll explain this in a minute because I watched your video and you share a few points on that. After playing this and how complex it was, I'm actually wondering if my rating with this would go down to a 7, and as such, does it have a future in the collection? Because the amount of palaver I had to go through to relearn this game did not seem to justify the 1 hour of game experience that you have playing it, because the AI is just doing its own thing. You're just doing your own thing. But again, you got to diversify like crazy to do well, shall we say. There's no point scoring, so you don't really have a target to aim for other than the tiers. But all that effort and the payoff just didn't seem worth it.
Yeah. And I think this, more than any other game in the Vital Lacerda Eagle Griffin games, canon represents both the best and the worst of Vital Lacerda games. I think thematically it's beautiful. It looks fantastic. I feel like, I can understand the orbit actions, why they matter. I can understand the colony actions and why they matter. But it's almost like it needed to be stripped back a little bit. And certain things maybe could have been introduced as expansions into the game rather than a core part of the game. Because as you say, the rules bloat and is initially it's stifling. Now this was my first ever Vital Lacerda game.
This is a game that already has 2 expansions built in. At least that's what it feels like.
Yeah, it feels like, but they are kind of an intrinsic part of the base game. And this was my first Vital Lacerda game. Randall was great to send me a copy about a year or so ago.
I need to get in touch with him, apparently.
And it was absolutely fun. I was overawed. I'd seen it on people's tables and whatnot, and thought it looked great. And I was so overawed and so eager to learn it. I sat down and I watched Paul's video, and I read the rule book, and I watched Paul's video again. And then I went into the game, and I think my first game took 3 or 4 days to basically get through solo. I didn't play two-handed. I went straight into the solo, and the reason being, and we spoke about this ever so slightly yesterday on some chat, is the number of micro rules that are involved in this. It's not as straightforward as any other Lacerda game, and from a solo perspective, that really hurts it. For example, when Lacerda moves from orbit to the colony, one of the first things he does is he builds a building, and that's hidden away. It doesn't feel intuitive that happens, but it happens when he goes to the colony there. So you've got to add another building. I get why that's happening, because he's trying to impede your progress there. He's trying to move up the LSS chart, etc. Then you move to everything else, and nothing seems entirely I can put it from a solo perspective. What Lacerda does, it doesn't feel intuitive. You've got the cards, and you flip over, and you've got to remember that it's only essentially got 3 actions on there. They're numbered 1, 2, and 3, but the 3 actions you can take on the orbit side are different to the 3 actions you can take on the colony side. And then when you get to those actions, you have to read what Lacerda's doing, and then go back to the rule book to understand what the base action is. That in terms of how it works in the base game and what he does there. Then it's all compounded by things like the rule of ambiguity and overcoming ambiguity, which is just a case of kind of put stuff a couple of X's away and work out your own system for determining where is the best place for Lacerda to put those. So it's asking you all the time from a solo perspective to do things that are best for Lacerda, whether that's the scientists that you take, the upgrade cards that you take, the tiles that you place on the board, moving his rover around the board. It's asking you to do what's best for Lacerda. And that's not good enough, because in a game that is this complex, you need that solo mode.
It needs structure.
To have structure. And I get bored by trying to work out which hex is where best place for the tile. So if I'm not upgrading a complex, I'm just going to stick it to kind of 2 hexes away. I don't care which 2 hexes are away from his from a current building of that time.
Yeah. It's hard enough to know what's good for me, let alone what's good for Lacerda.
Absolutely.
You've got all those rules, and that was one of the problems I had with the multiplayer, is that this game isn't as intuitive as the others with the actions. Yes, the theme makes sense, but I can't see from that board what I should do when I do a particular action, and there's no clear. I don't think there's a reference aid in here with a step-by-step diagram as to how things work. I don't think there is, to my knowledge. I don't remember it, But the Gallerist did. The Gallerist had player aids with step-by-step, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, with every action. So even if you hadn't played it for a while, you could go back, read that, and that told you what things did. Here, nope, you got to go back to that rulebook, which in Paul's defense is great. But again, as I mentioned earlier, there is only so much you can make things simple. You could write the best quantum mechanics textbook ever. It's still quantum mechanics. It's still a tough topic. It doesn't make it easy to learn. It just makes it less than impossible. And there is a player aid, and it does break it down into steps. But with each of those steps, within each of those steps, you've still got to refer back to the rule book. Unless you're playing this game a lot and continuously, as you said, you've got to relearn that stuff. Yeah, you're all right. It does have a player aid.
When I was going over the last couple of nights and playing the game, I was going through the steps and still thinking, all right, but does that mean that X, Y, Z happens? So then I refer back to the rule book. From a solo perspective, there is no solo player aid. So you're reading the solo rules, then you're going back to the main rules, and you're also potentially going into the reference book at the same time. It's a glaring omission for a game that has a fairly in-depth solo experience that requires you to do a lot. There is nothing to aid the solo player other than flicking between 3 books, and it's a crime that happens, unfortunately.
Yeah, and even then, like I say, the AI is just a tiny nuisance and sometimes isn't even affecting you. So it's like, why is it there? And then you get to the end and it's just the tier system again, which I don't like. I mean, if you love the tier system, then great, you're going to probably in that. But even if you do like the tier system, I just think the AI in this is the one that came to me as an afterthought. And I feel from the Kickstarter, it seemed like, because I don't think the solo mode was already originally in this. I think it was a stretch goal to get it in there. I could be wrong, but I don't think it was like from the get-go, here's a solo mode. But this one just felt like the solo mode was stuck in to appease Eurogame Kickstarter backers, because in all of them, to be fair, in all of them, the solo mode kind of feels a little bit tacked on, with the exception of Kanban that we just mentioned because of the dedicated AI deck with Turksy. Yeah. But a lot of the solo modes in the Lacerda games do feel like, look, this game is really designed to be a multiplayer game. This is where it shines, but here's a solo mode because you like a solo mode, and some of them work better than others. This one feels the most like, no, this game is multiplayer. Yeah. But fine, I'll put a solo mode in because you want it. Because even then, as much as, another reason why it's probably dropping a rating and it's in danger of getting cold is not just that complexity issue, but I want to play this multiplayer only, really. The problem is, I only really want to play it 4 players. But the problem is, if you play it with 4 players, this game takes about the rotation of Mars around the sun to play. It's the amount of hours it does is ridiculous. But the problem is, the reason I want to play it with 4 players is not because, firstly, the interaction on the planet is better, but that turn order track with the orbit. That's
Yeah.
one of my favorite parts of it, shooting in between orbit and chopping, changing the turn order, but also having those bonuses you can get at the top that dictate, all right, if I go to here in orbit, I choose whether I want to go first, second, third, or fourth, what bonus I want. And that's very important. In a 4-player game, especially important because you are really fighting for those spaces. And turn order will mean everything. In a 2-player game, doesn't matter. Because one of you could be on the planet, one of you could be in orbit, you could pick whatever one you like, and the turn order is meaningless. So I don't want to play this 2-player, and I wouldn't get it to a table much 2-player either. 3-player would be fine, but then I'd be saying I'd rather play it with 4, but then I know I need to find 5 million days in order to actually play the game, teach people this game, which is a nightmare. This is one of the hardest games I've ever had to teach, just because there's so much to teach, and even I'm not entirely 100% on the rules when I'm teaching it, which is always a bad fear. And that's what's scary, and I think the solo play of this morning is really making me think that, because it has sat in the collection, because I said 8 out of 10 before that I thought, yes, this has one of the hardest barriers to entry for a game. It's rated 4.57 or something on Board Game Geek as its weight rating. I watched a couple of reviews where somebody had played the solo mode and that, and they said, I don't understand why it's 4.57 weight. I reckon it should be more on par with Escape Plan and like Mage Knight and like a few of the smaller ones. I found Mage Knight to be more complicated than this or so. And I don't know what Quaaludes those people are smoking, but I can't imagine how you can possibly think that this is not at least a 4 weight on there. And people will sort of go, but the actions aren't that complicated in themselves. Well, A, yes they are, because you've got to micromanage a ton of them. But B, weight also comes into complexity to learn the game, and this is way more complex to learn than Mage Knight is. It doesn't matter if I don't like Mage Knight. I found it easier to understand Mage Knight than this.
Yeah. I'd probably make as many rule mistakes in Mage Knight, even after playing it so many times as I do in this. As I said, this is best and worst Lacerda. I think what he's done is create this wonderful structure and this wonderful game that plays very well with more people. And I think if you were to play this game often, you would get a great deal of enjoyment out of it. As a solo player, there are no training wheels on this game, none whatsoever. And you go hard, you go fast, and you're gonna get a lot of it wrong. Unlike Luke, I am looking forward to the expansion. I want to find out what the solo life is in this. I think it's called the Alien Invasion expansion. And I'm really looking forward to that and seeing what that does for this, because it's a game I really want to like more than I actually do. And when I get those little purple patches in it, when I'm playing a few moves and everything's connecting, I'm thinking, yes, I've got this. And then I hit a rules block on either the AI or on something that I've done. And I just think, I didn't.
It just depends on.
I want to like it more.
It depends on how much you want to put up with those rule blocks, because the problem is that this has got enough in it. I mean, this has got too much in it in terms of complexity for me, and that's what puts me off, because I'm never going to play this every week. It's impossible. A lot of these games on my shelf I can't play like a year on end. I need to be able to get back into the game, and I can't with On Mars. So if somebody says, I want to play a Lacerda game, which one would you like to play? I've got 4 others on my shelf I would pull out easier than this one. So out of all my Lacerda games, this one is going to get played the least out of all of them, yet it's the most complex. Yeah. And that is why it's in danger of leaving my collection, because I'm just thinking, look, if somebody says I want to play On Mars, I will gladly sit down and play it and enjoy it. But then someone else can teach me the game. Someone else can remind me if I'm doing a rule wrong, and I don't have to. And this could be like once in a 2-year period, I might get a chance to play it in full. So why do I need to own the game for that reason? Now, with this expansion coming out, granted, it's got that alien thing, although this is meant to be a semi-serious Mars game, and now you've got alien invasion. It's like that's kind of stretching the theme a little bit there, but it's going to be more complexity. It's going to be more stuff I've got to learn, and there's like, this game's already got enough to learn. How am I going to, for a game that I'm not going to play very often? I just don't think the expansion is going to suddenly, unless it fixes some of the original game, like redesigns some of it, it's not going to streamline it. Yeah, it's going to make it more complex.
We touched on it earlier, and almost thematically, you could have had modules to add to On Mars. You could have had a stripped-down base game and added and increased the difficulty as you go along. Think about a game like Dawn of the Zeds 3rd edition, where you're constantly adding additional rules the more you get to know the game. if this had, On Mars as a base game, strip back some of the stuff on here, and then you added these additional On Mars modules that were already included in the game, that would make it so much more approachable. But it just chucks you right in at the deep end. Doesn't even give you a kind of a rubber ring to help save your life in terms of player aids, etc. And I've seen that Mark on here has said that BGG has some decent material. Look on there for solo aids, which is great. And I absolutely think that fan-made stuff on BGG is fantastic. Problem is, I don't want to be doing that. You're giving me a game this complex, give me all of the tools to play it. And unfortunately, it's not quite there at this stage,
Yeah, you shouldn't have to do that. Yes, it's nice and it helps, but it's not in the game. It should be part of it. And even then, it depends on what stuff there is, but it's still a lot to learn. I mean, that's where I'm torn. It's like, if I might look at some of those BGG things and see, it's like, will any of these help me learn it easier? I can't see how much it will make me help learn it easier, because, when I had to learn this morning, I'm like, I've forgotten everything about this game. I've literally got to learn this from scratch, plus a solo mode, and now I refuse to play that solo mode again, because I'd rather play the other solo modes, like, instantly. So now this is purely a multiplayer experience, and I just can't see myself pulling this over the other ones, like, from my collection. And that's the thing. It's not like I'm going to... If I decide to cull this game, it's not because I'm saying it's rubbish. It's just that barrier to entry, or re-entry, shall we say, I suppose, no pun intended, is going to be too much for me. I don't want to be the one that's teaching this game and rules checking it constantly. I want someone else to do that. So somebody else can be at a convention and say, I want a meaty Lacerda game. Do you want to play On Mars, Luke? I'll be like, cool. Could you please refresh my memory as to how this game works? Because it is just, like, insane. There's just a bit too much in it. So, I mean, once we got in there, I like the joke that Jen made, solar flare, when we had that internet glitch. That was good. I like that. That was pretty good. But Margaret mentioned, like, the co-op solo expansion. It could be good, but it's complex enough. I don't think I'll justify the cost of the expansion and that. Shane mentions, is this a first Martian killer? They are not even comparable. I mean, they're apart from the fact they're on Mars, they're very different in how they operate. And I do get that with it's on my shelf. I still have it and I still love it. It had one of the worst rulebooks ever written. Ignacy has admitted that. The main reason I can get that back to the table is because a lot of the stuff's quite intuitive in it, but also a combination of Rodney Smith's Watch It Played video, but also, we did mention BGG resources. Somebody has rewritten the rulebook in the same style as the original rulebook. Get that, and you'll be able to learn the game fine. It's it had a shaky start, but if you just get that video and that rewritten rulebook, then it's fine. But I wouldn't even compare this to First Martians, because they're just, one is a heavy Euro game, the other one is a story-driven narrative co-op game. It's like they're completely different things. As we're sort of getting to the wrap-up stage, I mentioned, are we going to discuss a bit of Weather Machine? We'll cross that bridge in the long run, because I have purposely not looked a lot at Weather Machine, because I don't tend to look forward onto these games. I don't want to get on the hype train or anything. I'm just like, look, when Weather Machine is made, like, near retail finish, I'll look at it then and go, it's another Lacerda game. I'm interested. So, in the long term, that would be cool. I suppose if people want it, then we'll both get the game, we'll both play it solo, and we'll both get on here and discuss Weather Machine. I'm sure that will be a thing for the long run.
And again, like you, I'm aware of it. I've seen it on Vital's Discord channel. I know we did some playtest sessions on TTS, which I didn't get involved in. I believe that David Turch is doing the solo mode for it, so suddenly my interest has gone significantly higher on Weather Machine. So I probably will be backing it without knowing too much about it, because I've got a lot of faith in Vital Lacerda games, and I'm a bit of a completionist, and even with On Mars, as much as I potentially, have issues with On Mars, it's probably not going to leave my collection, because occasionally I would like to get it. Look at that artwork; that looks glorious. I will be getting. Certainly will be very interested in learning more about Weather Machine, along with Mercado de whatever it is,
Lisboa.
Which is a smaller, lighter game. Again, I know you can play it on Tabletopia or whatever. I backed that. I pre-backed that. I backed it on Kickstarter, because it's got a solo mode and it looks fairly lightweight, and I'm okay with something like that. I mean, I think I would always be interested in Beatles games. Yeah,
I didn't back the Mercado one, because I thought, are you just basically trying to do Lisboa but easier? I didn't know if I was desperate for it, because it focuses more on the grid mechanic, which is the bit of Lisboa that I don't go mad for. It's like, I like the grid mechanic fine, but it's the cards that I love more. Yeah. So taking that out doesn't necessarily work for me. I mean, I would play it, but I just didn't want to back it.
Yeah.
I will certainly take an interest in Weather Machine when it comes out because it does look cool, and I've got every faith in Lacerda when it comes to making a multiplayer game, just as long as it's not on Mars level of complexity. Let's rein it back a little bit in the complexity side. Give me a heavy thematic Euro, but just make it a little bit more accessible. Not to the die-hard, quantum mechanic people out there. But a lot of people are still excited for the new it was the new expansion for On Mars, which is fine. So it's fine. It's going to do. That is my only worry. I mean, it doesn't look like it would be too much more complicated. Certainly not to On Mars. There's not enough on that board that looks like there's a million things going on.
Yeah.
So this is kind of looking to me as a kind of Kanban level of. I mean, they're all complex. Yeah. I mean, I suppose it's hard to compare, but as I say, I'm more than happy to take a look at this when it comes up. So,
and I think that's it. I think when we look at all of the Lacerdas solo, and we've gone obviously 2 hours and 10 minutes into our discussion on this, and people will come back and say, "So, should I get Lacerda for solo?" And I think you've got to do a lot of research because Lacerda demands a couple of things. First of all, a healthy investment. As we've discussed, on most of them are triple-digit investments to go for a Lacerda game. Secondly, you've got to understand that some of the solos, as they are, and some great fan-made variants out there, some of the solos, as they are not the best solos. So it depends on what you're looking for from here. If you don't mind that so much, and you've got the spare cash to do that, then absolutely. The other thing I would say is it feels like they are getting better with their solos. Now we've got David Turchi involved, and if we could get Eagle Griffin to do a connoisseurs series and go back and do all of them, I'd be really interested in that. That would be fantastic.
I did like that idea, actually. If David Turchi could go back and rework some of these solo modes, I think that would be pretty cool, because there's some that could really do with it. In terms of are they getting better with their solo modes, hard to say, really, because Lisboa was decent enough. I mean, Lisboa is probably the best of the Lacerda Eagle Griffin made solo modes.
Yeah.
But even then, that has some issues. On Mars, as we've discussed, has a pretty weak solo mode. That came after Lisboa, but that came before Kanban. And like I say, Kanban has been re-implemented to have a better solo mode. So, I mean, they've only just made one game that has a really good solo mode for it. So I wouldn't say it's like they're now currently doing it. But I mean, if they can just... Oh yeah, true. Yeah, that's fair enough. I haven't. That's not my game. Yeah, but okay. I'll go 2. All right, so 2. All right, so they're on an upward trend. Certainly, I think from like the diehard love every Lacerda game fan or something. So yeah, that's fine. In which case, if they can carry on that trend, then great with Weather Machine. I think it's like right, fine.
Yeah.
Realize that solo mode should not just be shoved into a game. If you can't take the time to make a really good dedicated solo mode, then just don't put it in the game in the first place. I know people will moan about it, but seriously, not every game needs to have a solo mode. I can live with the other games. I have Sleeping Gods on my table right now. I have campaign games like that and This War of Mine and stuff to play solo and Journeys in Middle-earth. If a Euro game doesn't have a solo mode, I'll live. I've just reviewed, Whistle Mountain. I've got to edit that video soon. It's got no solo mode. Fine. I'm not entirely sure how you would design a solo mode for Whistle Mountain.
He is developing it. Luke Laurie is developing a solo mode for Whistle Mountain, and how that's going to come out, whether that be a CGE type thing where it's an additional download, I don't know. Obviously, he did a cracking job. Luke Laurie, who's designed Whistle Mountain, did a cracking job with the solo in Dwellings of Eldervale. So that's that it obviously can work. And I do want to actually say that, one of the other things that people should do when researching Lacerda for solos is, Luke and I have discussed it quite a lot here, and there's a lot of stuff out there, but please do lots of research. I want to mention another relatively small content creator, and that's Jeff Duran over at Board Game Rants. He's exclusively solo, and he does a lot of videos on very heavy Euros, and he's gone through the entire Lacerda collection, and he's very vocal about what he likes and what he doesn't like. So please check out Jeff Duran at Broad Game Rants for some alternative viewpoints. There we go. Alternative viewpoints on Lacerda solos, because and some heavier games. He reviewed Dwellings of Eldervale based on my recommendation. We've had dialogue about it. I love it. It's my favorite solo of last year. He wasn't as bought in with it. He enjoyed it, played about 15 games, but it wasn't really for him. But he's got a lot of deeper Euros there, Jeff, and he deserves a bit more love than he's actually getting. So do go and check out Jeff.
Yeah, I like the Dwellings solo mode. I mean, people are sort of calling it their favorite solo mode. Yeah, I wouldn't go anywhere near saying it's my favorite solo.
Of last
Mainly
year
because
for me it was, but I get that. Yeah.
well, that could be. I mean, it's definitely up there in like top 50, I suppose. Like solo modes if I ever tried something like that. But yeah, I mean, I like it a lot, but people were saying it's like their absolute favorite. Funny you should mention Board Game Rants actually, because I mentioned earlier that I watched a few videos and people were saying it wasn't on Mars wasn't worth the rating. This was the video I watched.
Right, okay.
I watched his video on Mars. Just out of the blue, I just went on Board Game Geek and searched solo mode, and his video came up. And he makes a big deal about, I don't think this is that heavy compared to a lot of games. And I'm just thinking, what are you smoking? So there is no way that this is not that heavy. But like I say, check out his opinion as well as everybody else's. So
Jeff can sometimes have 2 Lacerda games on the go at one time on his tables. So that's, he operates on a different level to some of us, but his commentary is always massively useful and insightful. So if you were coming here to kind of expect us to say that you should absolutely get Vital Lacerda games solo, we're not going to say that, because I think purely solo, it's a judgment call you've got to make. They're never leaving my collection. I will periodically play all of them. And although Luke and I have gone through kind of the last couple of weeks, pretty in-depth process of playing each one of them solo. And I said to Luke before we started, it's going to be a while before I play a Lacerda again. I'm already thinking about getting Kanban back to the table. And I need to finish my game of Lisboa. And that's how they get you, basically,
That is the thing. I mean, I've certainly, me, I speak my mind, I've been honest, so there's definitely been an equal level of love and hate for what I've been saying about these solo games, but the reason they're in my collection is because their multiplayer games are great. So that's the primary reason I have them. I didn't buy them for solo modes, and I don't think, other than possibly Kanban, would I say get a game purely to play it solo. Certainly not with any of the others, not even Lisboa or Vinhos one. Kanban, I could possibly say that, but then that's the most recent one with a dedicated Turksy solo mode in it. Yeah. So you need to buy these games, I think, ideally, knowing that you want to play it at least 2-player, at least at some point, and not just have it as a dedicated solo. Because I never, I probably will never play unless somebody can give me some targets for Vinhos, like, right, sort the tier system, let's like give me a VP thing, or find a way to tweak that difficulty. I probably won't do Vinhos solo again. Definitely not going to do on Mars solo again. Gallerist solo I probably won't do either, because I'd rather play that multiplayer. Lisboa, I could see myself playing that solo again. I mean, that is definitely my favourite of the Lacerda solo types, shall we say. And I would happily, as you say, pull out Kanban and play that solo anytime. So, 1.5 of the games I would happily pull out and play solo, but I've got 100 other games I can play solo. So it's like, if anything, heavy Euros don't tend to be my favourite solo games because the mammoth learning and takedown and setup and all that lot. The fact that I can play some like Fields of Isle solo is a bonus, not going to lie, but there is something I appreciate about being able to pull out something like Coffee Roaster in 5 minutes and get it played in 10 minutes and put it away under Falling Skies and a few of the others. Granted, I've got Sleeping Gods on the table. That's a bit more an investment, but that's story driven. Somebody asked earlier, what sort of stuff do I prefer in a solo game? Is it mechanics or story? And in fact, here it is. Yeah, over there. So hello to you. So do you like solo games with mechanics or games with stories like Tainted Grail, or both? Both, but I'm definitely skewed more to a story perspective. I can forgive some iffy mechanics if the story is engrossing me in, and Tainted Grail is a perfect example of that. But, there's not a huge... Out of all the solo games I play, most of them aren't the Euros. Yeah. They are typically the story-driven games. The LCGs are story campaign-based. Journeys to Middle-earth, Tainted Grail, Robinson... I suppose Robinson Crusoe is a bit story. Sleeping Gods, a lot of the solo games I will play will be the story-based ones. And if it's going to be a Euro, it's typically because they're easy to get to the table, or a bit like Fields of Isle, they are sandbox. Yeah. So I do love the sandbox feel of them. I mean, I've played the Mind Clash ones solo, and they're very good solo modes in those ones. But just like the Anachrony one, like the Chronosis and that, it's not exact. I love the solo mode, but it's not easy. It's like I've got to learn a ton of stuff for it.
Yeah, and I think I am more or less almost exclusively a solo player. Luke's gone and paused again. Yeah, I'm almost exclusively a solo player. So for me, that
Which
oh, you're back, Luke. You froze a little bit then. Yeah,
it's
so
just BT. Yeah,
yeah. I'm on almost exclusive. I would say 99% a exclusive solo player. So I do like a story-driven game. I do like an Ameritrash game. I'm just as happy sometimes playing a game of Eldritch Horror as I am a game of Kanban EV. But there's certain days, and I wake up, and I've gone through. I've been playing Anachrony Infinity Box a lot since I got it early this year. I withheld getting Anachrony because I really like the thinky challenge that it gives me. Same with the Lacerdas. I like that challenge. But I will also love to play kind of Too Many Bones or Hoplomachus or Fortune and Glory or something that is something is pretty much a dice chucker if you like, because I love that experience. So I don't think I'm tied to a particular one as a pure solo player.
I can think of easier dice games to play than Too Many Bones for a kickoff. Just check out my review on that one. But
I saw it. Yeah,
that. But so there is that. And one thing I'll mention actually, because I was just thinking about it while you were talking there. I mentioned why I don't like the tier systems in this one, and that is because I suppose this is one reason why I prefer the story-driven solos to a Euro solo, is that I don't care what my score is. Yeah. I never played time trials on racing games as a kid. Or so you could play Mario Kart with friends as a multiplayer and battle mode, or you could do the time trial mode. And my brother would be the sort of person that'd be like, "Come on, I can get that extra second out, and I can beat my time." I don't care. I want to race against other players and beat them. My target is, this is my opponent. But let's take a game of football. I don't even like football, but I'll use the analogy. I'm playing against the opposite team, 5-a-side, and we could either win 1-0 or we could obliterate them 10-0, whatever. I don't care if we obliterate them 10-0. It's the same outcome as if you beat them 1-0. It's a win. And same goes with any Euro game and that, I don't care if I win by 50 points in a Euro or win by 1 point. It's still win.
A win.
That's what I go for. So I don't care about the solo modes where in Euro games more, where it's kind of like, right, you played this solo mode. You got between 60 and 70 points. You are this rank. Now try and beat your own score. Now, I don't care about beating my own score. I had fun with the mechanics and I beat your AI. That's my objective. I'm not... Close finishes are cool, but yeah.
Play your own game. Win your own way. If you win, great. If not, make it about the journey and not necessarily the destination. By the way, that's what £70 worth of small metal cars looks like. That couldn't be
shiny
glossy metal cars.
They look fine, but I just couldn't justify that money.
I get that.
That's £170 for a Lacerda game, and it's like, wow, was that a bit much? Right, before we wrap this up, there's one more question. I'm going to do one more because this is, like I say, a long stream and that, and obviously, who's going to watch a 2.5-hour stream? Hopefully, lots of the Lacerda fans. That's what I'm hoping. But question we got there. So, do you research games, making sure if the modes are tacked on or not? Are they deal breakers for you for your purchase decision? So, we're talking about the solo modes, like, if the solo mode was integrated from the get-go, or perhaps was it like a stretch goal on a Kickstarter? I don't personally research games for are they tacked on or not, but the first thing that gets into my mind is, if it's a Euro game, I'll already have the fear it's a bit tacked on, because I'll feel like they're really predominantly made for a multiplayer. Whereas if a story-driven game gets a solo mode, I'll think, well, that kind of works. I'm playing Sleeping Gods now solo, and you've got to control all the characters, but it's easy enough. They just got a couple of abilities each. But then in most co-ops and story-driven games, playing with more players simply just means you give them each individual characters and you discuss. That's well and good, but then it's not that much different to the solo mode. So they work solo as well as co-op. Yeah. Whereas a Euro game solo mode is usually going to be fundamentally different from a multiplayer experience. But the first red flag I will say is Kickstarter when it comes to a solo mode, because if the solo mode is a stretch goal, that means you didn't design it from the get-go, or if you did, you're pulling some underhanded tactic for raising money, I guess. But
I think there is a school of thought on that, and it is certainly true in some stretch goals on Kickstarters some solo mode stretch goals on Kickstarters that they are tacked on. The other thing is, and this was raised by a couple of people, is that the solo mode might have always been there, but it requires additional components, different cards, So therefore, there is a cost involvement. And I get that. I think there's a transparency required from a Kickstarter stage. Don't tell us that the solo mode, tell us if the solo mode has been there all the time or not. If it hasn't been there and you're developing it as a stretch goal, then that is a bit of a red flag. So more transparency is absolutely key there. And it kind of comes back to what we've got to be careful about what we ask for as a solo community. And I touched on this in my review of Pendulum last year, which I slated. I detested the solo mode in Pendulum last year. I went on a full-on rant about it, and it caused me to make.
That implies you like the multiplayer game.
I never played it multiplayer. And don't get me wrong, Stonemaier have done loads for the solo community, but Pendulum should not have had a solo mode. Not every game needs a solo mode, should have a solo mode. So we've got to be careful about what we ask for. And it's starting to happen. And we're seeing solo modes being developed with more love, care, and attention as the market grows. And that's absolutely fantastic. So, yes, research. Can I always tell whether they're tacked on? No. Have I been bitten by backing games where the solo mode is not very good? Absolutely. Have I had some surprise solo hits as well? Yeah, Dwellings of Eldervale. I just, irrespective of whether you think it's the last year's best or not, the general consensus is it's an excellent solo mode. So do your research by all means. Don't just listen to people like me. Do your research from a lot of people out there.
Yeah, I mean, a solo mode in the Eurogame is a bonus. It's not the reason I buy the solo game. I mean, you mentioned that Whistle Mountain, he's developing a solo mode. That is fantastic, because I already like the game. If you're going to make a solo mode for it, I don't know how you would design it, considering how that game works. It seems like that's a tough job, but if he makes it and it's great, that's a bonus. Co-op games and Sleeping Gods and This War of Mine that we mentioned, I buy them predominantly for solo, but that's because co-ops can be played solo, which is fine. But a Euro game, if it has a solo, it's just purely, oh, cool, I can play this solo. I don't care if it doesn't, though. And there are exceptions to the rule, like Fields of Arle, where you mentioned like it's the journey, not the destination. Fields of Arle is a perfect example of that, because I think that's because it's a sandbox game. Yes, you just beat your own score, I think, in that one, but the journey in that one is so satisfying as a sandbox game, I'll go with it for that, even though I know I'm just simply doing my own score because the journey's so good. With a Euro game, though, it does and some do get surprising. I mean, Dwellings is kind of a hybrid game, but that's still a really good solo mode. I was surprised by Wingspan having a really good solo mode for essentially a lightweight Euro. I thought the Automata deck worked really well in that one. But as I sort of look around, I can see games where I wish it had a solo mode, but that's because I like the game a ton already. Like, I mean, I would pay Ryan Lockett to make Empires of the Void 2 solo mode. I honestly would. But, sadly not the case. Edge of Darkness was a surprise one, that the AEG, like Mystic Veil, sort of spin-off that they did, the really complex one, that's got a really good solo mode in it, I found. So that was like a surprise hit. But I'm trying to think, was there anything else that I wish had a solo mode? Sometimes they get it wrong. Civilization: A New Dawn, I've just noticed, that's a perfect example. That has a solo mode done after the fact, so after the game is done, and that always makes me feel a bit like, oh great, you really didn't design this for the solo mode, you've just now invented it. But the solo mode in that one is okay, but it's not great. But then they brought the expansion out about 2 months after they brought the solo mode, and they're not compatible. So now I've no interest in playing the solo mode because the expansion doesn't work with it. It's like, come on, at least do it from the ground up. But we'll see. Anyway, running on to 2.5 hours. If people are going to watch this that are 2.5 hours long, then kudos to you. Prove me wrong. And to be fair, I've seen the views on a lot of the other streams I've done so far, the collab streams. They're 2 hours long. They're still the most popular stuff. I think people are just glad that I actually have somebody to talk to for a change, because everyone's got sick and tired of listening to me by myself now, and ditto actually on that fact. But now I can bring people on and chat. And to be fair, let's just say, your insight into a lot of these solos is good, because I love solo gaming, but you solo game for life. Pretty much. It is your thing. So you've got that experience, and you have played all 7 Lacerdas. So we needed this one, and I think this was your. And also, don't forget, this was his request.
Yeah. So Lou reached out very kindly as part of his kind of helping small content creators initiative. Asked him to collab with me, and we talked about top 10 lists, but there are a lot of those around. And then on the back of Kanban EV coming out, I just thought, actually, I get asked a lot of questions about Lacerdas. Let's do that Lacerdas discussion. So, Luke, well, first of all, thank you to everybody who's kind of joined us through this. Some of you have been here since the beginning. My God, thank you very much.
I was to say, you didn't have much to do this today.
If I see you at a con when those things happen again, then please reach out and I'll buy you guys a drink, and it'd be great to meet some of you face to face. And Luke, thank you for this. This has been brilliant and fantastic. It's great to actually, we've liaised a lot, but never kind of physically spoken or actually spoken.
Not much, yeah. We're on Facebook constantly, like responding to each other's comments, and it's like, wait a minute, oh yeah, that's Mark. It's like,
but most of all, Luke, the kind of helping small creators initiative that you've done, I think it's just an absolute stroke of genius. Channels like mine, which are still relatively young, and the people out there, I've mentioned a couple of them that have certainly less subscribers than me, and the people out there that have more, and we're still considered small to mid-size. But what you're doing and raising the bar and raising the profile for a lot of content creators is just work that nobody else in the board gaming industry is doing, and I thank you very deeply for myself and everybody else that's involved in this.
Thanks. Honestly, I mean, I mentioned it on Stonemeyer's blog post he put out when he got me to write a bit for that. At the end of the day, the larger creators, some Dice Tower do their little bit with board game contributors and that, but a lot of the other big creators are their own thing now. I mean, they make a living out of it. It's all about, I mean, I know I go on about views and that, but for them it's gospel. And the big creators become bigger. I mean, the Rodney Smith conglomerate is now no longer Watch It Played. It's now these two Twitch streamers, and then it's this guy, and now they've brought in before the next trending channel out there. So it's kind of like, great. So the rich are getting richer. The small channels need a voice.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm still small. It's like, I'm still small compared to most creators. And bear in mind, I've been doing this for 6-7 years. So yes, okay, I'm at this stage now, but that is slow growth. I've been sort of laid by the wayside. I know what it's like to start off doing this and feel like nobody's watching. Yeah. So and I've made a lot of friends with the small channels before I started this initiative, but even more so now. And I still watch other people's videos, and I'm just like, you know what? This is a genuine person who enjoys games. Okay, so it doesn't have a £1 million budget behind it. You think this does? No. I'm still amateurish, but it's like there's no bias with a small content creator. They're not trying to appease to every designer and thing out there. I choose to not get biased just by standpoint, speak my mind. But, that hurts me in a sense. It won't hurt a smaller creator too much. But at least it's, as we say, do your research on a game. I'm just sort of trying to say, look, yes, you can say that these big channels are the next best things since sliced bread, and some of them I still watch. I still watch Dice Tower regularly. But, don't forget the smaller folk. And if you want to research a game by checking out a lot of different opinions, then the small creators are the way to go, because there's a lot of them out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Agree with that. Yeah.
Anyways, so thanks, Jen, Lydian, Mark, Hexy, Beast, Christoph, Jonah, when you were here, Paul, when you were here. Yeah, where's my Jaffa cakes? You better still give them to me. So I'll put maybe I'll message him with a timestamp for when we're praising him to bits or so, and he'll forgive us for that.
Yeah. He'll put it on a loop, won't he? That's what he'll do. Yeah. It'll be. I take it you're going to GridCon later this year. He'll have it on a constant loop in GridCon. Basically, that. So, yeah.
If honestly, the first time anybody mentions a gathering, I'll be there. It's like, I don't care when it is, I'll be there.
A year ago this weekend, since Aircon, I saw you at Aircon, but I didn't speak to you because I didn't really know you. But yeah, that's a year ago this weekend was the last con that we had. So
yeah, I mean, I know other places have had, shall we say, different levels of lockdown and that, but people have sort of said looking at the Wolfman and things like that. Put it in this perspective in that lockdowns first started last end of March. The last convention I went to was Aircon, up in Harrogate Way. That ended, lockdown just then began. For a good 50% of that time, in fact, actually probably getting on to about 60-70% of that time now with this lockdown, we've been in lockdown. Retail has not been open. Dice cafes have not been open. Indoor socializing has been practically banned, with the exception of occasional support bubbles, which if I didn't have those, I'd have gone more than insane by now, more loopy than I already am. And, so for 30% of the year, we've had some degree of normality, I can go game with people, but otherwise we haven't. We've been strict, and like I said, we won't get into politics and that, but you say there are reasons for that. But you can put it this way. We are desperate to come back to a convention, and I can't wait for that time. So by all means, if you do find us at a convention, just say hi, give us a hug, because we've had a year of no hugs and I think we need them now. So we'll work with that. But
Indeed.
Anyway, 2.5 hours. We need to wrap this up. So thanks everyone. Thanks to Mark. And as we said, not board gaming. Check out the channel. Solo videos are plenty. So yeah, if you want to find out about solo games, Mark's definitely one of the channels you need to sort of focus on, because that's pretty much his whole bread and butter. And I'm sorry you had to go through Pendulum. That game sucked. But I love Scythe, I love Viticulture, and I love Wingspan. But yeah, Pendulum was a miss. Every publisher has their bad title, and that for me, that was the one. But yeah, Indeed. Plenty of stuff on there. So by all means, #support creators, go check him out. So, and like I say, you wouldn't believe he was a small channel if you just saw him umpteen amount of times on the Facebook solo groups, because he pretty much lives on there. In a good way. You'll constantly get him posting on there. So anyway, that's it from us. We'll see you later, guys. Hope you've enjoyed. Catch you soon.
Thanks, guys. Bye.